Skyrim, A Sorcerer's Tale by Rastislav. 481, Chapter 98, In the Halls of the Dragon Priest. By the time Freya had managed to collect her wits, every single cultist around the risen temple had been ended with an ease that both impressed and horrified her. She remained unawed, however, and did not hesitate to rejoin the trio of heroes from the mainland. She pointedly did not pay attention to the Pale One's retracting claws. "Well," said definitely not Bloodsucker spoke up, "that was certainly easier than I expected." "These were meat shields at best," the self-proclaimed Dragonborn scoffs. "I'd bet you 1,000 septims the actual cultists are further down, hiding behind their thralls as their kind often does." Speaking of thralls, Serana gives the battlefield a look over. "How sure are we didn't just slaughter a small army of innocents?" The elf returns from scouting the temple entrance, having heard the entire conversation from a distance. Raven Rock hasn't been compromised, and our young shaman has confirmed her own people are still near their settlement. "A fair point," Minthara nods. "Found anything interesting?" "One of those stones, apparently. Bunch of tools discarded around it, with half-built walls of what I am guessing is a shrine of some sort." He looks at Freya. "You know anything about the stone?" "The tree stone." She shakes herself from a slowly growing stupor. "My father had forbidden me from ever communing with it for a reason I didn't understand until now." "And now?" Minthara asks. "Herma Mora is often said to be connected to trees." The shaman mutters, "My gut tells me it has something to do with that. It fits with your tale also." The Dragonborn nods before turning to the temple. "Well, we won't find out anything by dawdling," and marches to the stone in question. Just as Nerevar said, the edifice was surrounded by a half-built temple of sickly green stone, its base subsumed in a disgusting, writhing tar-like substance. "Ugh!" Minthara winces in disgust. "That smells vile," earning immediate agreement from the two other women present. Nerevar, on the other hand, merely shrugs. "Good thing my sense of smell is duller than dead." "There is definitely Daedric power being channeled from within," Minthara says after a brief examination. She narrows her eyes and pulls out the necklace hanging under her chest plate. The mere presence of the Amulet of Kings immediately charges the air with power and metaphysical weight, and as its inheritor clutches the reforged pact, she speaks, "Begone." Even without the dragon tongue, her voice sends ripples through the air, and the edifice around the stone crumbles like a spiderweb before flames, its imposing presence disappearing with a whimper of protest. Naturally, that is when the tar-like liquid at its base coalesces onto itself, and a vile monstrosity of ink and tentacles bursts out with an enraged roar in its throat, its undulating limbs swinging out with deadly force enough to rend asunder the most seasoned of warriors. But the creature was not facing mere seasoned warriors, and just as quickly as it struck, so too was its blow parried with a bronze shield, and its body struck with bolts of flame and lightning, swiftly joined by a powerful wind that only made it burn more quickly. Even after the creature was obviously slain, the fire did not stop coming. For an entire minute, the perpetrator of such righteous retribution inevitably found herself facing a trio of questioning looks. "Don't give me that look." Serana shudders with disgust as she hisses, "I am not getting anywhere near that." The trio share a look, and as one nodded in agreement. The temple doors were closed behind them as they descended down the halls, whose air was oddly fresh. Noticing this, Minthara sniffs around for a bit before nodding to herself. "Definitely inhabited." "And just as large as you guessed." Serana interjects, her hand glowing green as she leaned it against a wall. "I can't get a perfect picture due to the wards, but we have quite the trek to take." And as if to confirm that statement, the nearest sarcophagus burst with the familiar grunt of an angered Draugr. "These tunnels seem endless," Freya not quite complained. "To think such a place lay buried for so long. Isn't even the oldest one I've been to." Minthara smirked before narrowing her eyes. "But I will admit it is one of the more irritating ones." With a grunt, she threw her hammer, a weapon obviously not balanced for such things, and hit a freshly emerging undead with the haft, utterly pulverizing its head before summoning it back to her hand. They descended deeper and deeper into the temple complex, down numerous stairs and through even more of the honored dead, every single on of whom had to be reminded of the truth that they were in fact not meant to be walking around. Minthara didn't even find it exciting, as the poor things broke before she could even get a proper workout in. She wasn't quite sure if she was happy or irritated when the air shifted and a presence, distant yet connected to the temple itself, made itself known. Ah! A male voice tinged with a familiar power echoed, "Welcome to my humble abode, sister." Minthara's point of view. My eyes narrow at the address, and my three companions still behind me. Miraak, I presume. In the flesh, I could feel the smirk, an almost familiar one in fact. I did not like it. "Ah, but where are your manners, my sibling? You know my name, but I not yours." "Minthara Septim," I tell him, and nearly laugh as Freya stumbles behind me. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" Some ire enters his voice. "You enter my temple, slay my thralls living and not, and you ask me what do I want?" I do not hesitate for even a second. "Exactly." He doesn't answer for a few good moments. I see. I know a forcefully dramatic sigh when I hear one. "You will not be so brazen when the time comes. We shall meet when you descend, and you will witness true power, slayer of Alduin or not." And just like that, the presence retracts. What a prick. I shake my head with a snort. "Let's move on." "Not worried he is actually waiting for us?" Sarana asks, more curious than worried. I merely scoff at this. If he was capable of leaving, he would not be drawing attention by enacting an island-wide ritual. Agreed. Nerevar nods. This all seems like the usual grandstanding. He was both right and wrong, as I could feel the draconic parts of myself growing furious at his taunts. But it was something I have learned to mostly contain. He was trying to goad me. If I was less used to my powers, it could have even worked. We descend deeper down in a ponderous silence, slaying Draga as we went, until we reached an enclosed chamber with only the entrance we came through. Or so it seemed anyway. Some minor fiddling and scrying. Later the wall on the far end of the chamber split, and we came upon an oddly out-of-place grand staircase, flanked by dragon-bone ornamentation on both sides. It was all rather ominous. Not that it slowed us down any as we ascended without slowing, soon entering the familiar chambers of a word wall, one that contained knowledge on the dragon aspect shout that I had long since mastered. Oh, and there was a pretty powerful Draga in there, but he died before he could blow us away with a shout, and I tossed his ebony axe to an increasingly frantic Freya. So frantic, in fact, she nearly dropped the thing. "What?" I asked her. "It is a proper weapon." She blinked, sheathed her own axe, and nodded. "Aye, Dragonborn." Didn't the Skald place special value on their style of smithing? The thought struck me before I disregarded it utterly. Not my problem. The fallen Draga also held a key that opened the way forward, and we were all rather surprised when we found that the area beyond the gate shifted from usual Nordic tomb to lived in underground quarters. In fact, we could all hear the hustle and bustle of a small village from within as cultists bereft of their masks meandered about without a single care in the world. Well, excepting the unfortunate duo that got their heads removed by wind blades, couldn't have them alerting the rest after all. We decided on the stealthy approach, and soon we could hear traces of conversations going on. "How long do you think we will need to stay down here?" a bored Dunmer asked his Nord compatriot, one that Freya was directing a death stare at. "Probably a skull, then." "A few days more, at most," said Nord shrugged. "Lord Miraak gave us his orders last communion, so just let the initiates." He chuckled. "Deal with any problems and enjoy the rest. We won't be having much of that when he descends." I nod at Nerevar, who stays behind, as we continue sneaking by. "Hey!" The Dunmer seems to notice Freya, but too late as he is speared through the gut with a spike of earth, and his comrade has his head sundered. Sundered. Huh. We take out a few more small groups in a similar manner before another conversation caught my attention. "Hear what happened to Brokvar?" a woman asked a trio of other cultists. "Aye." A man nodded with too much glee. "Fool thought he could take a peek at the artifact. The overseer taught him a lesson that will last him a lifetime." The rest of them chortled, the implication clear. "The artifact?" I whisper. "Sounds like something I wouldn't mind taking." "Done collecting information?" Sarana asks boredly. Yup. I smile at her. They can die now. The vampire didn't hesitate a second before disappearing in a cloud of chittering bats, falling upon the quartet and causing them to scream in panic and pain before they were utterly silenced. And then a poor fool raised the alarm. What was it he said? I thought with a happy smile, oh well, here I go, killing again. For some reason the cultists seemed to prefer fleeing towards the obvious vampire instead of facing me, but for the life of me, I couldn't have guessed why. Mercy please, Urk. The final cultist screams out as he is impaled into a wall by a bored vampire lady. All done, Nerevar asks, utterly uncaring for the new coat of paint on his armor. Serana casts a detect life spell and nods. Every single cultist is dead. Excellent. I clap my hands. Now to grab my artifact. Freya trudged after us, looking nearly as pale as Serana. Finding said item was not difficult at all. In fact, it seemed suspiciously easy, despite the supposed fate of one of the cultists. Then again, cults did tend to do the whole test of faith thing more often than not, right? Shaking the idle thoughts away, I entered the chamber and was immediately baffled with just how different it was. If the largest part of the temple was a tomb and the living quarters looked more akin to a series of well-made stone homes, then this place looked like an odd mix of a library tower level and the very same greenish stone built around the locus up above. However, what drew most of my attention wasn't the room itself, but what it held, a large, nay huge tome that looked to be bound in some odd fleshy bark and was obviously not mundane in nature. So you have finally come, my sibling. Miraak's presence returned without warning. I hope slaughtering my followers was as entertaining for you as it was wasteful. I wouldn't really call it slaughter, I mimic the titter of Raven's pet Daedra. I believe the proper term for it is pest control. You did not take my advice then. He notes with false disappointment. No matter, open the tome and we shall meet face to face. Since you are so eager to challenge me, I invite you to face me. I felt something scratching at my senses and slowly began to notice little flickers of sickly green-yellow light in the corners of the shadows, revealing themselves to be eyes akin to those of toads once I focused. There was only one real answer to this offer. As I clutched my amulet, let me think, open the obviously Daedric book while in the sanctum of someone obviously incapable of forcing me to do so. I cup my chin and pretend to ponder with an overly loud hum. I think not. Coward, he barks, and I feel the challenge echo into my very soul, but I take hold of it. All that bravado, and you fear to face me. Oh, we will be seeing a lot of each other later, Miraak. I smirk. However, don't expect it to happen on your terms. Now begone. I feel pure fury radiate off him for a moment, tinged with what appears to be fear. He disappears too fast for me to truly understand, and so too do the eyes. Raven's point of view. Why do I suddenly feel so very smug? Minthara's point of view. A silent moment passes before I shrug it all off for later. Nerevar, can you pack the book up safely? Probably, the elf half asks, half states, shouldn't be a problem until we meet up with the rest, I hope. The last bit is a barely audible mutter. Good. I nod. Serana, Frey. I pause as I turn to face the other two. Why is she unconscious? Serana gives the out-cold Skarl a bored look before facing me and shrugging. Is this what the Skarl call proper adventurers? How disappointing. 482. Chapter 99. Meeting the Skarl. The house offers belated praise to one's BP, and she's got the jack for their most enlightened life decisions in supporting our future efforts. Rejoice, menials, for the soup shall flow in abundance on this day. Raven's point of view. My head bobs left to right as I whistle an old tavern tune I heard somewhere, the large metal boat, you never know when you might need one, below me cutting through the calm sea with enchanted surety. A perfect moment to enjoy the mist-covered vista that are the shores of northern Solstheim. Would make a delectable painting as well. My mind supplies. Naturally, some people just couldn't let me have my moment. We are sailing about like fools, why exactly? Neloth's annoyed voice interrupts my enjoyment. Because, you old fart? I slowly turn to face him and the rest of my group. I don't often get to just sit back and let my mind wander. I tilt my head, that and we need to wait for the others to finish their work anyway. Fair, he scoffs. Isn't enough for you that you dragged me out of my home and spat on my work, and now you want to waste my time as well? Spat on your work. I quirk an eyebrow. Why, Master Neloth, I do believe the one spitting on your work is none other than yourself. I grin as he frowns. In fact, when I saw a beyond centuries-old elf calling that lexicon repaired, I wasn't sure if I should laugh or cry. Indeed, grandson, indeed. Savos nods along sagely. Though I must admit I was a bit disappointed that you didn't give the good master here a chance to try his hand. It would have been quite entertaining if he were to try and use the repaired work and have it malfunction on him due to the damage being tonal instead of structural. We both snort as he finishes speaking. All my hate. Neloth glares. You have it. And what an honor it is. I offer an overly elaborate bow before noticing Marwyn leaning forward as he observes the shoreline. Anything of note? I ask him. I feel him startle even as his body doesn't flinch. There appears to be some kind of camp, Nords by the looks of it, but different to what you described the Skarl as. Seems like the camp is far too large for their number as well. Off hunting or something more sinister, Savos posits. Could be anything. I shrug as I do a quick scan, noting that they are all under the vague influence of the fuckery currently going on, enthralled it would seem. Just as I finish speaking, I feel a very distant and very faint wave of power shimmer from somewhere within the island, the familiar touch of Akatosh, or more accurately his child. And just like that I feel the fog lift from the minds of the Nords, their confusion slowly turning to horror. We can check on them later, they look to have more than enough food as it is. Good. Neloth scoffs to hide his relief. I was expecting another damn detour. I smirk at him, causing him to narrow his eyes. Don't tempt me. He looks like he wants to rip me a new one, but wisely he keeps his mouth shut. A shame that. We continue our little boating trip northwards, passing by an island that held what looked to be a rather large barrow of some prominent Nord, and then moving westwards toward a nice spot I scanned near our destination. As we stood on solid ground, Neloth and Marwyn both wobbling about a bit more than I'd have expected, a sudden sense of smug satisfaction assailed me out of nowhere. Probably nothing, I am sure. The Skarl village was not that hard to find once we disembarked, as even without my sight one would have to be blind, deaf and retarded at the same time not to notice the giant shimmering white pillar of light made up of mysticism-aligned magicka. Calling it a village seemed something of a misnomer, however, as the place was more akin to a small town in truth, even if they lacked fortifications beyond good positioning and sturdy-looking homes. Live with nature my grey ass, I scoff, fucking tree huggers. The place was eerily empty as we approached, the only sign of life being the trio of magi currently kneeling around the pillar of light and channeling their meager reserves into it in an admittedly consistent and skillful manner. Only one man, an old whitebeard, seemed to be idle, if one could call overlooking the trio to be idling, that is. He noticed our approach and tensed with worry, momentarily seeming to reach for his magic even as he observed us. He proved himself not to be an addled idiot when he ever so slowly lowered his arms and let his magic return to stillness, approaching us with careful steps as he did, "Ho there, travelers." But then he pauses and his eyes narrow as he notices Neloth. Master Neloth, I believe our previous talks made my stance on your aims rather clear. Oh, trust me, you bumbling buffoon. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't forced to, the Telvanni retorts sharply while pointing his thumb at me. Direct your questions at this one. Now, Neloth, no need to get prissy with me. I chuckle and face the man. You are the local shaman, correct? Elder shaman, he corrects patiently. Storn Cragstrider is my name. An honor and a pleasure. I smile and incline my head slightly. I myself am Raven Dagoth, Great Lord of House Dagoth, Hortator of Morrowind, and Prince Consort of the Tamrielic Empire. Neloth scoffs. Storn, on the other hand, blinks rapidly, a mixture of panic and confusion emanating from him before he forcibly calms himself and nods back. Mighty titles all. Indeed, I smirk, and while you might feel the need to contest the fact this island, I lean in. in its entirety lies within my domain twice over, and the current state of affairs is less than acceptable. So you are here to try and fix things, he asks, skipping over the whole, you don't truly rule us spiel, and wisely focusing on the present. I will admit I doubted there would be much help from the mainland, if any, but if one of the slayers of Alduin offers aid, it is aid I will gladly accept. Heard about that, did you? I quirk an eyebrow. He reflexively looks over his charges before turning back to me. Aye, hard not to even in these parts, especially with a scholar from Skyrim staying with us recently. He sighs, not that he was spared the ailment of the land. Ah, yes, I confirm, the whole Miraak cult kerfuffle. Aye, he frowns, you are informed then. First Dragonborn, mind control, temples built for island-wide ritual, said Dragonborn being Mora's pegging bitch. I nod, I am quite aware of the state of things. Pegging bitch? I barely hear him mutter before shaking his head. That is good. I had started losing hope and even sent my daughter to the Temple of Miraak to try and find a way forward. But an elf of your renown must have some way to help us. Most likely, I nod, to the nearby stone then. He is just about to agree before he pauses. Did you pass the temple by any chance? Concerned for your daughter, I ask, and he nods. Don't worry, my wife should be dealing with that side of things. Pardon me, but... He frowns. Your wife? The current Dragonborn. I smirk, and the poor man deflates with relief. Good, he mutters to himself. That is, yes, good. He straightens his back. Follow me then, I will show you to the stone. It takes us barely 5 minutes of walking to reach the place, and what we found was both impressive and disturbing. Hundreds of Skarl all working nearly without pause, only stopping to refuel and let their bodies rest the bare minimum. I will give Miraak this. At least the fool didn't fall down the work-them-to-death rabbit hole, the imposing foundation of a tower forming around them. That just would not do. Prepare to extract those closest to the stone. I order, and my companions all ready themselves. Storn, I will leave the explaining to you after we are done. A toil I will be more than happy to undertake. He nods firmly. Thus, having ensured my protection from curious yapping, I summon forth my divinity for the first time in a while, and am shrouded in a cloak of grey flame, the land below me transforming into simmering ash as my form ever so slightly distorted beneath my armor. I could feel the power seeping through the nascent temple turn its gaze at me, but it was already too late for it to react, as I strike out with my hand and cover the entire thing in flame. The Skarl stumble as the influence is ripped from their minds, and I feel both Savos and Neloth begin telekinetically dragging them from the stone itself, while Akulakan rushes forward to ward those who are too slow to move. In mere seconds, the entire structure, sans the stone itself, disintegrates into ashes, the power within them rending asunder with them and dissipating safely into the air as pure magicka instead of returning to its origin. A bit forward of me to announce my presence so soon, but Mora would have to be an idiot not to know of my approach the moment I stepped foot on the island, and likely before. The now boiling once ink bursts up, and a heavily wounded and emaciated-looking lurker comes forth. Naturally, this is when Scorch decides to summon himself and screech "Dibs!" before slamming into the poor fucker and ripping him apart with beak and claw. The poor fuckers who were just liberated must be thinking they are on a trip, because the sight of a fiery bird, radiating life and joy, nomming on some eldritch horror eyes, is something that boggled even my brain. Storn gives me a very long look at what just transpired before wordlessly moving to help and guide his people away. Dusting my hands off, I turn back to my group and am nearly taken aback with the sheer fucking greed in Neloth's eyes. Oi! I clap my hands in front of his face. My eyes are up here. He flinches away, blinking his mind into focus and frowning. What are you? Your lord and master. I answer bluntly, and for the first time I don't see him bristle at the information. Now stop gawking and help ensure no one dies to an accident. He stares at me for a long while before ever so slowly nodding, very well, and walking off. Savos waits for him to leave fully before muttering, he is going to do all he can to find the source of your power now, I hope you realize. The poor fool can try, I scoff, so long as he remains useful. Very practical, Marwyn speaks up. Though I too am quite curious, that wasn't any kind of magicka I ever felt. I will tell you when you are an archmage. I grin at him, totally inflecting it as if I said, I will tell you when you are older instead. His skull twists into a scowl before he scoffs and walks off, flipping me the bird as he did. Oof. I place a hand on my heart. It seems he has a bone to pick with me now. Savos pauses utterly before turning to me with a manic grin. At least he has grown a bit of a spine. I sigh dramatically. Too bad he seems too rattled to see his own progress. Savos offers his sage nod once more. Showing him a better way will be a joint effort. We stare at each other for a long moment after that, and then break out into a fit of childish giggles that slowly turn into ominous cackling the more people start giving us looks. By the time we calmed down, we were on the receiving end of some very confused and mildly disturbed stares. Poor tree huggers couldn't even partake of such a fun little branch of humor. Another giggle leaves me, just slightly more ominous than before, and they all promptly disperse. A few hours later, we are all back in the village, my little group having elected to remain outside while Storm dealt with all the confusion and disorder. Not that we only wanted to give them space, as I had detected our fellow band of adventurers hours ago, all three of them safe and sound and with an extra in tow, and approaching us from the southwest. They soon came into view, and I saw both Minthara and Serana walking with a near skip to their step, while poor Nerevar, who seemed covered in far too much blood, lightly tugged at the shell-shocked Nord woman beside him. I wonder what had them so merry. Well, except for the Skarl girl, she looked like she had seen some shit. All the more fun for me. 483, Chapter C, A Small Feast and a Plan. And here I was hoping we would arrive first, Minthara greets as her group nears us, a light skip in her step and the distinct tinge of eaten dragon soul around her. You manage everything you wanted. She doesn't stop said skipping until she is leaning onto me and smiling happily. Yup. I nod happily while drawing her into a light side hug. Got 2 books and the old fart in tow, even shot down a dragon. I feel Neloth's gaze trying to burn into my back. Her eyes brighten in predatory satisfaction, and so do Serana's. We got one as well. Poor idiot didn't feel like negotiating against his master's orders. That he bothered to speak at all was rather telling when my own opponent was silent. Or you just killed him too quickly. Scorched deadpans. Or that. I make a distinctly neutral noise at that. Well, you can fetch your treat later. She nods rapidly. Any other trouble on the way? It was almost eerily calm after the dragon. Nerevar cuts in, completely calm, even as filth-covered as he was. Feels like our enemy decided to bide his time after his failure. Mildly troublesome but unsurprising, I note after a bit of thought before shaking my head. We best go greet our hosts now. Their elder shaman should have managed to calm them down by now. My father is well? The shaken Nord woman, whom I'd have probably forgotten if I were capable of the act, snaps awake. You Freya? I ask, and she nods. He is perfectly fine. She exhales, all the immense tension she no doubt built up on her quest leaking out of her, and promptly rushes into the longhouse where the vast majority of the Skarl currently were. Just as I am about to get to introductions, Neloth decides to be a bit proactive. He narrows his eyes at Nerevar. Me, moon and star deadpans. Been a while, Neloth. The Telvanni scoffs. I should honestly not be surprised to find you here. What offer did he make to make you follow him around like a lost puppy? Honest work. The armored elf shrugs, utterly uncaring for the disdain. Honest work, Neloth parrots disbelievingly before letting out an uncharacteristic snort. Honest work. You, the same bastard who went through 5 damned towers and looted everything within just so he could get his title back. Their defenses were shit. Nerevar just shrugs again. They were practically asking for it. The Telvanni narrows his eyes and grinds his teeth for a good while. I will be watching you. His target says nothing, not even acknowledging his words. As our dear unnamed fellow here said, I point my thumb at the old fart. This here charming lad is Neloth. He will be the designated help when it comes to all things Mora we need. Ignoring the bristling of the man I very nearly called a fetcher, a slave to the less civilized, I go on with the introductions, getting everyone up to speed as both sides shared their experiences and confirmed that both myself and Minthara could in fact cleanse all of Miraak's efforts without any great trouble. That Miraak sought to taunt her into meeting him was quite different from what I remembered, which meant he either needed her for some manner of ritual to free himself, or Mora was pulling his strings without him knowing. Potentially even an attempt to draw me to them before I was ready. An arrogant thought indeed, but not one without basis in reason. Sadly, before we could really get into the meat of things, the doors of the longhouse opened once more and Storn stepped outside, his eyes widening fractionally as he noticed the fresh arrivals, but only or a moment before he met my gaze. "Everything in order, Storn?" I ask. He nods. "Aye, my kinsfolk are calmed, and I thank you for your patience. Freya told us of her own quest, and we would be honored if all of you would join us for a small celebration so that we may thank you properly for your deeds." He smiles contentedly. "Our mead may not be Thurk, but I'd swear on my honor it is some of the best you will ever taste." And that was all it took to drag us in. The longhouse was large and cozy, built to last and to hold as much heat in as possible, while still remaining at least somewhat comfortable by rural Nordic standards. A good number of the Skald were still awake and talking to each other as we entered, though the majority of them were sleeping off their bone-deep exhaustion. Miraak may have had them rest, but only so much that they didn't damage themselves permanently. The hubbub died a rapid death as we came into view, and all of those that could rose from their seats as one and gave us nods of thanks or raised their tankards in greeting. Though surprisingly, the usual ruckus one may expect, former bunch of Nords remained absent. Flametongue and Dragonbane. The close to middle-aged woman who was obviously the leader of the lot of them greeted, "Tales of your deeds have long reached our halls, and we are twice indebted, both for the slaying of Alduin and the freeing of our minds from Miraak's thrall. Admittedly a byproduct of our own aims." I ever so slightly bob my head in greeting, but a happy one nonetheless. What my dear husband meant to say. Minthara clutches my shoulder just a tiny bit too tightly, and I pretend to wince. Is that we were more than happy to help. The Skald leader snorts and nods. "Your reasons are your own, and we thank you all the same. I am Fanari Strongvoice, and I welcome you and your companions to our village for as long as you need to stay." "You have our thanks," Minthara grins. "Now I do believe someone mentioned something about mead." The Skald all cheer, and soon we are finally greeted in the proper Nordic fashion, with hearty food and strong drink. The Skald all take turns meeting us and sharing a few words of thanks, both in their own names and those of their fellows currently too weak to attend, and even as we enjoy their hospitality, it is inevitable that a good number of them trail off to have a bit of rest for themselves, while an invisible line is drawn between us, the visitors, and the rest of them. A truly organic way to give us a chance to plot and scheme indeed. So I lean in as I cast a ward around us. You got it. Storn and Fanari, both of whom were wordlessly invited to join us, raise their eyebrows. Yes. Minthara ignores them and pulls out the massive black book. Damn thing has been whispering into my mind for hours. I snap my fingers and lock the little shit into a nice and tight ward before waving for Akulakan to approach, place it with the rest. "And that makes 3, Savos mutters, "only 4 to go." "But what then?" "Gathering Hermamora's books seems unwise," Storn interjects. Potentially, I give the old man a dismissive shrug, but I wouldn't necessarily agree. "Another one of your cunning plans." Minthara's lips quirk upwards. "Indeed," I nod sagely. "For you see," Neloth sighs, "I perceive 2 paths before us. Path the first," I raise a finger dramatically, "we wipe out any mention or artifact of Miraak's, strike down his temples, and erase him from history while doing much the same to his patron and his own agents." I clear my throat to forestall reactions. This would be a stopgap, and we would be leaving the problem for someone else to inevitably deal with. "Sounds to me like you'd be rid of the both of them for some time," Neloth drawls. "Recovery of such influence would take them many, many centuries." "That," Minthara points at him, "or they would simply redirect their efforts elsewhere." Mora may even be tempted to let Miraak loose where we don't expect him, and that is asking for a pain in the neck. The Telvanni shrugs, a possibility. That sounds like the secure option, Savos hums and then gives me a flat stare. You don't do secure options. Yes, far too sanitary for the likes of the great flame tongue. Marwyn joins in. Go on then, tell us of the outlandish idea you already decided on. Flatterers, the lot of you, I fan my face. Returning to the topic at hand, I go on, path number 2. I raise a second finger. We proceed as we intended, hunt down any hostiles on the island and cleanse it of all tomfoolery before using the black books to rip Mora and Miraak a new one, preferably while heavily weakening the former and slaying the latter. The sound of sudden choking draws my gaze to the local Telvanni, only weakening one of the most powerful Daedra. Neloth asks, simplicity itself, no? I nearly managed to cut Bal's arm off. I deadpan. His mouth clicks shut, but not before a good 5 seconds of gawking. Loath as I am to agree with the impertinent skeleton, Savos smirks as Marwyn glares at him. He does have a point. I've never known you to do things halfway, and as my new granddaughter said, Minthara beams, it would solve nothing in the long run and even make things harder. Just thought to put things out there, I shrug, set the cards on the table as it were. We are dealing with them now, Minthara speaks before anyone can comment. We have other things to worry about, and we've already invested time, effort and manpower into coming here. True, I nod along, a semi-permanent solution is what I was leaning towards anyway. Many dry looks are directed my way. Right then, Minthara taps the table. Neloth and Savos, the two of you should start gathering information on the remaining black books. Marwyn, you can join them as well. All three nod easily enough. Serana and you. She looks at Nerevar. You will return to Raven Rock and help direct the troops there to clear out the island from the more mundane threats. Fine by me. Nerevar shrugs while Serana grumbles a bit before agreeing. Oh, Minthara snaps her fingers. You three should take Akulakan as well, so he can keep everything warded. Junior directs me with a questioning look and I shrug. Very well. And what about the two of us? I ask. Why, we will hunt down the books, cults, and dragons, of course. She grins. I deadpan at her. I don't hear you disagreeing. She smirks. Shaking my head, I merely let out a warm chuckle. We go over some minor details of our newfangled plan, mostly the actual direction every group would take, and soon our path is set for good or ill. Storn seems to disagree, however, as he spoke up in a grave tone. If your companions could retire for the night, I would speak with only the two of you. There is some grumbling, but soon only Minthara, myself, Storn and Fanari are left within the ward. You both said that you fought and slew dragons on your way. Storn cuts through the silence. Dragons that seem to serve someone else? Yes. Minthara nods, and one of them referred to Miraak as its master. It is as I feared then. Storn closes his eyes, and I feel him war with himself for a long while before he opens them once more and nods to himself. It is said that Miraak attained a powerful shout that allowed him to challenge the dragons in ages past. Probably why he sold his soul to Mora in the first place. I scoff. Quite. The shaman nods with a tinge of morbid amusement. The old tales speak of a place in the north of Solstheim where one such shout lay upon a word wall, said to give the user power over others. The way in which he enthralls them, Minthara narrows her eyes. A mighty power, Storn exhales, terrible but mighty. Minthara meets my eyes with a hint of suspicion within before she looks back to the old Nord. And why would we need this if we can already contest him? The knowledge would protect you, or so the knowledge passed down to me by my ancestors tells. The shaman answers bluntly, I am unsure of how his power would work against whatever protections you already possess, but I feel not preparing as best you can would be the greatest folly. Fanari grunts her agreement. You are both known to be honorable. She directs a look my way, in your own ways. Much amusement ensues. Not many others are as deserving of the trust we would put in you. And where is this word wall you speak of? Minthara leans back in her seat. Saring's watch. He answers simply, an old minor temple of the dragons, once conquered by Miraak and then taken back by Varlock the jailer. He pulls out a map made of goat skin of middling quality and marks the spot. You will find it atop its peaks and beyond its many dangers. Minthara closes her eyes and begins tapping the table. Leave us. The two Skarl seem confused for a moment before promptly scurrying off as the pressure in the air builds up. She remains silent for what for most would be an uncomfortably long moment before she speaks. You were aware of this. I don't even bother pretending otherwise and instead offer a cheerful, yup. And you didn't see fit to share this with me? She opens her eyes and I see a fair bit of annoyance within. Why? You know my stance on mindfuckery of that kind. I shrug, not backing down one bit. We are capable of dealing with everything without it, and I don't want the temptation in the back of my head, nor yours. Is that really for you to decide? She snaps, but I feel it has no true heat from her. Yes, I deadpan. It is a rabbit hole I don't wish to have opened, and I wouldn't be the one to direct us at it, especially with the alternatives we already have. She huffs even as her frustration slowly dissipates. And what if it is the only way to protect ourselves? What if all it takes to take full control over us is just getting clipped by the shout? What then? Well, at least she is irritated out of concern and not greed. I point at her, but also highly improbable. He is no god, and both of us are higher than him on the divine scale anyway. You really are sure of that, huh? She asks after some silent thought. You completed your purpose, and I became the exemplar of my people. I shrug. Look, if you want us to go and get the first word of the damn shout, we can do it, but we aren't touching more than that. She narrows her eyes, and seeing me once more not back down, she sighs, Fiend. Oh, don't be like that. I grin and lean in. Come now, what tribute may this poor Mer offer to assuage the great dragoness's wrath? Her expression turns thoughtful as she looks me over. I can think of a few things. Talk about a rapid shift in mood. 484, Chapter 101, The Deadly Duet's Jaunt. So you have some general idea as to where it is, but not really? I deadpan at the old man so terribly cursed with baldness. Not terribly helpful, is it now? Tharstan, the Nord scholar who had spent the previous year researching the Skarl, merely chuckles at my admittedly rude response. I am afraid such is rather usual to finding lost tombs and works, flame tongue. He raises a hand to forestall me. But no, I managed to do more than that. I know the tomb is located to the east of the island, somewhere atop the north of the cliffside, beneath a small hill of stone. There should be markers and other signs that would lead us to it. But, I probe. But, he nods, those lands are currently in rakeling hands or are being actively fought over by either the Skarl descendants within Thurk or these vile cultists that seem to be sprouting in each and every corner of the island. Humming in understanding, I raise an eyebrow. Not so spry anymore, eh, old one? His lips twitch upwards. Quite. I've been in a few scraps during my time, but searching an area like this at my age would be asking for death. Divines. He huffs. I may even keel over because I trip too bad. Fair enough, I snort. Seeing as all you need is time and security, you will be happy to know the island will be getting brought into order soon enough. So all you need to do is wait and prepare yourself for a long search. Tharstan's eyes widen, as decisive as you were rumored to be. He bows his head. I will wait eagerly, even if I am dread to part with the Skarl's hospitality. They are quite welcoming, I hum in agreement, and then notice Minthara stepping out of the longhouse. And this is where I will be leaving you. Keep safe, old man. Winds keep you, my lord. He bows. A kine enjoyer, eh? I offer the man a small smile and walk away. Straight into the grumpy dragoness, her eyes still half-lidded from waking up morning. She mumbles and yawns. What? She pauses and yawns again, stretching awake and blinking a few times before continuing. What did the old man want? We were discussing legends of the island, mostly about the ice giant Kstag and Varlock the Jarlier and his tomb. I explain. He has some idea of where the latter is located. Her eyes instantly brighten with interest. Oh, are we going to go looking? Later, I deadpan, much to her immediate dismay. We have more important things to do, and the tomb isn't going anywhere. She tries not to pout and fails miserably. Fine, I was hoping we could recruit him. My thoughts exactly. I smirk and offer my arm, directing the both of us to the rest of our companions. As someone who has faced Miraak once already, he'd be of great help, even diminished as he no doubt is. She nods along. Yeah, seeing the dragon priests almost makes me sad for the legends they once were. Cunts more like, I snort and she laughs. I get that dragons are scary and all but worshipping them enough to go for a shitty form of lichdom and just sleep for thousands of years seems much even for a bunch of fanatics. Well, they were technically heroes worthy of Sovngarde, Minthara points out leadingly. Ah, that made more sense then, and a certain cunt was gorging himself in said realm. I do not speak for a few long moments before coming to the simplest conclusion. What a shit system. A shit system by a shit god. She agrees with a cruel grin. A shame I did not get to devour him. Come now, my dear, I drawl, you'd have gotten indigestion. She doesn't even finish processing my words before letting out a rather unladylike snort and immediately covering her face. Oh gods, that is disgusting. Not wrong though, I point out cheekily. Our banter slows as we near our retinue, all of them wide awake and ready for the day's challenges already. Savos, Neloth and Marwyn were in their own little group, discussing the books and a potential ritual to locate the rest of them, while Serana was happily regaling a curious Nerevar on how to butcher a dragon with the most efficiency. Akula Khan just stood there menacingly, as he always did. Oi, Tinman, I call out to my predecessor. Serana stops talking and they both turn to me. Even helmeted as he was, I could feel Nerevar's raised and slightly annoyed eyebrow. Didn't you murder a giant going by Kstag at one point? I ask. Kstag? He parrots quietly before slowly nodding. Yes, a surprisingly intelligent giant from what I remember, had a group of Reiklings serving him and even built a castle for himself up north. Word is his spirit still lingers. I relay what Tharstan told me, think he could turn into a problem. He thinks about it for a moment and shrugs. He was powerful, yes, but not enough to truly threaten us. If you can track down this spirit, best be rid of it just in case. One can never be paranoid enough. I nod sagely. Exactly, he states with utmost seriousness. The rest of the group had joined us mid-conversation, and after quickly going through everyone's task again, and ensuring no one did anything rash or stupid, we said our goodbyes to the Skull and went on our way. For whatever reason, Storn looked all too happy to see me leave. I only optimized your ward so your people didn't have to charge it eternally, you old fart. No need to get uppity with me. Not my fault he couldn't tell a firewall from a proper ward if it slapped him in the face. Philistines and tree huggers, the lot of them. General point of view. The people settled around Tel Mithrin had finally begun calming down after their near brush with sudden and absolute death. Some of them even went as far as to start relaxing. Now that Master Neloth's watchful gaze had gone with his visitor, a figure the apprentice was surprisingly tight-lipped about to those who had the influence to ask him directly. So confused were they by their current state that when the headless dragon corpse in front of their settlement was overtaken by an ominous glow, every single one of them began cursing the world in increasingly creative and disturbing ways, for it certainly had something against them in particular. Naturally, that is when things abruptly calmed down once more and the corpse simply disappeared, revealing a pair of figures behind it, the very same visitor of Master Neloth and a red-haired human woman clad in impressive armor. Raven, Minthara mutters even as her soul sings in joy at getting another meal. I feel like we should leave. Whatever for, her spouse asks cluelessly. We should go, she repeats while tugging at his robe. Now. He goes to respond, but in the corner of his eye he catches an apoplectic-looking Dunmer woman with a pan in her hand and death in her eyes. Ah, he blinks. Indeed, the locals appear to be quite miffed for whatever reason. Minthara deadpans as he snaps his fingers and they disappear, living the furious crowd without a clear target. Neloth's apprentice, who had seen all of this go down, wisely decides to raise the wards and not show his face. Just in case. A large snow troll strolled languidly down one of the many hill paths of northern Solstheim, the corpse of a boar strung up by the tusk, dragging behind him as he headed to his cave after a long day of hunting. His primitive mind half dreamed of gorging himself and then sleeping the spring away in safety and comfort. The distraction would cost him, as he failed to pay heed to the noise coming from above. The noise did not stop, and the excited "Wahoo!" began closing in at fearful speeds. Finally, the troll turned to see what was going on. Just in time for a near-flat metal boat to leap from a nearby snow-covered rise and slam into his head, decapitating him with a loud wet crunch. The boat did not stop, and instead struck an outcropping of rocks a few meters behind the now headless beast, sending its two occupants flying into the air, which only served to make their excitement grow, as the pair heedlessly flapped down the hill, rolling in the snow without a care. Their descent stopped a few dozen meters down from the road, both of them laughing their asses off, as neither was even slightly disheveled by the bumpy ride, much less harmed. Minthara sighs in contentment, refusing to move from her new snowy cushion. "You were right, that was fun." Snowboating, a truly noble sport. Raven snorts, himself stuck in a similar position. "I do have to ask, though." His wife speaks up as they start getting up. "Why do you have a boat in your storage?" Raven pauses before ever so slowly turning to face her, Minthara, as someone who is reasonable and tends to invest into each situation the proper amount of preparation. "Of course, I don't have a boat sitting in my inventory at all times." He leans in and says with the utmost seriousness, "I have too." The hunter previously pursuing the troll and now observing the pair wisely chose to turn around and return to his tribe empty-handed. He may be blessed with might, but this was something belonging to Sheogorath's realm, and not Hircine's, and he was not about to risk it by drawing the attention of these lunatics. Raven's point of view. "I blame you for this," I grumble as I drag the far too unwieldy horned giant skull. "I usually have help for these sorts of things." "Wasn't it you who insisted we fetch the skull?" Minthara smirks at me. "Why complain now?" "Because I didn't consider the fact placing it in another plane may have consequences for the soul, and I don't want to ruin it yet," I respond dryly, which I usually don't have to, as I have help for that sort of thing, which means you are to blame. I wisely conclude and raise the skull. "Now carry it." "Nope." She pops the word. "I had to trudge through a cave filled with those goblin things because you got curious, and that is all the effort you are getting out of me." "Come on, I totally do not whine. I even gave you a snack." No snacks are worth seeing goblins. And that was that. Truly, finding Kstag's skull was not even barely an inconvenience. The giant's presence was surprisingly noticeable, and once I had a general idea of what to look for, he was incredibly easy to pick out from the eclectic mix of Mora's mindfuckery, the good Daedra's influence, and the odd aura of the All-Maker that felt suspiciously like a mix of Akatosh and Kine. It was obviously no intentional product of the two, but the energies were quite reminiscent of them, even if more primal. Likely an offshoot of loose power or whatever it is that gods do with their many iterations. An ice giant, no matter how supposedly powerful, stood out like a sore thumb, lonely on the island as he was, and tracking him took us only a few hours of detour to the north. Our path southwest came to a rather rapid close as we clambered up a series of ancient granite stairs, revealing a small temple carved into the side of the mountain carrying the usual dragon cult iconography. But no dragon. My eyes narrow as I toss Kstag's skull onto the snow. Someone knew we were coming. The telltale grunts of the Nordic undead forestalled any further conversation as dozens of Draugr, all of them quite strong by the usual standards, stepped out of the temple in battle-ready formation, their fellows charging onto the ramparts above us with bows in hand. The Draugr didn't hesitate, and the entire first line immediately rounded on us, and as one shouted, "Fus Rodar!" But they were too slow, and Minthara and I appeared above them, accompanied by the sound of cracking glass, and without any need to communicate, we fell upon them like a storm, she with her dragon aspect invoked, and myself with spells targeting those I could not reach with my arms. Needless to say, they lasted for less than a minute once we turned serious. And yet our victory soon came to feel like a defeat. For once we stepped out onto the clearing, holding the word wall, we found it to be utterly destroyed. Even the supports were near ruined, and only rubble remained. That little shit, Minthara hisses. Feeling quite miffed myself, I add, I have to respect the spite at least. He knew we would come here. She ignores my bout of wisdom, and he knew his forces wouldn't even slow us. So he chose to deny us our rewards. I nod, the right choice strategically. A right fucking annoying choice is what it is. Minthara fires back and glares at the crumbled stone. Feeling slightly suspicious, I went to ask what she was planning, but before I could even open my mouth, she acted. I did throw up an anti-scrying ward, just in case. She took a deep breath and spoke, Gol's Tide Vo. And just like that, without any fanfare, the stone suddenly decided it wasn't broken, and the word wall stood before us, whole. Truly, I drawl after quickly hiding how impressed I was. Your ability to serenade sediment brings a tear to the eye. She turns to me with a smirk, no need to be jealous. I naturally flip her off. She grins and walks to the wall, soon followed by myself. A mere second passed before she spoke, Goal. Her voice emitting a threatening wave of orange gold that sent the slightest shudder of concern down my spine. She just shunted the dragon soul she got into it, didn't she? No doubt feeling my stare, she turns to me with a teasing grin. Want to test your theory that you can resist it? I'd rather not, I deadpan. Uh-huh. She nods smugly, practically radiating the words, I win. But I wasn't about to fall into that trap, and instead turned to the greatest part of any adventure. Ransacking the absolute shit out of the place for anything of value. Though I will admit a small amount of surprise and a tinge of disappointment, I was left to do it alone. Hopefully Raven Rock didn't burn down while we were gone, I mutter as I return to the clearing, finding my wife still staring at the wall with focused eyes and whispering in fluent Dovazul. My words snapped her out of it, and she turned to me with a withering glare. Really? Had to distract you somehow? I shrug with a cheeky grin before frowning. Now let's get going before it actually burns down. Shouldn't have tempted Murphy like that. She lets out a sigh of fond exasperation. One day you will tell me who that is. But it is not this day, I declare, and with a snap of my fingers and a wave of space magic, we are gone. 485, Chapter 102, and they call it a mine. General POV. The second day of Raven Rock's rescue, as some of the more eager residents would end up calling it, came with an odd air of peace surrounding the town. A few hundred Reiklings still remained scattered in the surroundings, but save for the rare report of a crossbow releasing, one could be forgiven if they mistook the city to be under no threat. A siege did not simply disappear, and yet here they all were, safe as could be. Which is why, for all the excitement of yesterday, an intrepid trio of eager adventurers found themselves trailing a comrade of theirs as he talked with an old man. Well, it was more like one adventurer dragged his two companions along, but the songs will never say that, and so neither shall they. What is he doing? Lydia of Clan Olafsson of Whiterun, housecarl to the dragonborn crown princess of the Empire, narrowed her eyes. Nothing sensible, that much is certain. Junior of the Penitus Oculatus answered blandly. Something tells me I won't like where this is going. Oh, do cheer up, you two. Marco of Solitude, mage, bard, all-around badass, self-proclaimed, and surprisingly a renowned participant in the arena, rubbed his hands eagerly. I am sure our good friend Stormcloak isn't going to do anything too stupid. And yet here we are, following him. Lydia gives him a flat look. You are planning something. Me? He faux gasps. Never. Quiet, Junior hisses as she sees the old man visibly deflate in relief. It looks like they made a deal. So he really is going to do it, Marco mutters, with an odd mix of surprise and begrudging respect. Yes, Junior nods, and we are not following him. But sadly for her, Marco only needed the first part of her answer, and was already approaching the man. Skirnir, my good man. He greeted the Nord. What is this I hear about you snooping around the mine? The de facto leader of the Dragon Banner hides his surprise well and merely laughs his discovery off adventure calls in these odd lands, and what kind of Nord would I be if I were to miss it? A living one. The annoyed voice of Junior joins them. You do know we were ordered to hold position, yes? Ah, but my lady, Skirnir smirks. We were told to hold Raven Rock, and a mine overrun with potentially controllable Draugr is a threat to that order. He lowers his voice. Besides, old Cretius told us he'd give us a copy of all his notes and maps if we were to discover what happened to his great-grandfather, and I doubt our future rulers will mind having veins of ebony open for use. The silence stretches for a long moment before Lydia mutters, "He does have a point." Junior sighs, "Lydia, no." "Lydia, yes," Marco exclaims. Skirnir, seeing some remained unconvinced, spoke up again. "Those Draugr need cleaning up no matter what we do." He faces Junior. "Think of it like this. Your task is to keep your charge safe and protected, yes?" She very hesitantly nods. Stormcloak grins. "Well, think of this as us preemptively protecting her by eliminating all threats." He claps his hands. "It shall be glorious." A sudden wave of magicka startles the Nord warrior, and he glares at the source, finding a confused Marco staring at him. "Since when did you learn to bullshit like a Cyrodiilic?" Skirnir blinks and then barks out a laugh. "You don't get to lead hundreds of rowdy warriors without some wordplay, sad as I am to admit." "Why does that make sense?" the elf mutters to himself while lightly palming his face. "Because of course it does." Stormcloak, "Now let us get going. Worst way this ends is with us still in the mines while the heirs return. I am sure my boys and girls will survive without me to look over their shoulders for a few hours at least." Marco goes to agree, but is interrupted by the noise of a throat being cleared, all of the quartet rounding on the intruder, only to find an oddly contrasting duo. One robed in white and gold and leaning on a silver spear, while the other was clad in well-crafted blackened armor that was either dark orichalcum or ebony and accented with runes of purple. "Ah," Skirnir's back straightened. "You wouldn't happen to have only just arrived and completely missed our conversation, would you?" Alor, retainer of House Dagoth and something of an apprentice to its lord, shook his head. Stormcloak could only shrug. Can't blame a man for trying. The reaction of Dagoth Ulthis was invisible under his helmet, but the familiar feeling, immensely diluted as it was, of someone staring into their souls, quickly drew all eyes to the source as he spoke up slowly and decisively. "Tell us of these Darugs." "Draugr," Alor corrected reflexively. Ulthis slowly turned to look at him, just staring for a long while before ever so slowly nodding, "Draugr." He looked back to the quartet. "How dangerous are they?" "Remind me," Marco's voice echoed through the deep mine shaft as he cleaned his sword from frostbite spider viscera. "How long have we been marching down here?" "Just over an hour," Alor responds lightly as he finishes drawing the bit of poison that managed to get into Lydia due to a lucky strike. "These mines are larger than I expected." "Previous East Empire Company land," Junior explained, her eyes still fixed on potential approaches as she did. If the investment wasn't worth it, they would not have bothered financing a town small as Raven Rock is. "Sensible," Aldous agreed, "but only halfway so." Alor gave him a questioning look. "If the place was already worth the investment of a town," Aldous explains as he checks his blade for chips, "then clearing it out of danger would still have been better than simply abandoning it. Happened around the Great War if old Cretius was right." Skirnir speaks up. "Could be they just forgot about the place because of some mishap or something." He shrugs. "Those were hard times." "Paperwork," Alor chuckles. "A more dangerous monster I have never faced." Much grumbling agreement ensues from those who had tasted such suffering. Their conversation trails off, and after a quick break, they continue their descent into the depths, soon reaching the bottom and revealing a decently fortified passage, blocking the way into what looked to be structures made by man's hand. "Aha!" Skirnir cheers. "It would seem that the old man wasn't completely insane." Junior stops mid-step. "You thought he was insane and still listened to him." "Of course." The Nord grins and nods, not a hint of sarcasm to him. The blockade is dismantled promptly and without much issue, the act only slowed by Alor, who made a point of taking the time to trap it with a stonewall rune just in case they failed. An ominous act, and yet a necessary one in his eyes. What awaited beyond, however, swiftly distracted them all from such thoughts. They simply dug the rock next to inactive Dorga. Marco's eyes widened. They didn't even bother removing the weapons. Could be that they didn't want to disturb them. Skirnir kneels in front of a Draugr seated upon a throne, a bit of disgust growing in his heart as he was faced with the fact the EEC would treat the resting dead, so just for some profit, and these poor fools do seem inactive. A trap? Or some kind of protection? Before he could get his answer, the undead's eyes snapped open, its growl furious and its glare hateful. Skirnir flinched as a blur of silver and gold passed over his head, burying itself into the creature and setting it alight in gold. Alor slowly retracted his spear and gave the grateful Nord a nod. We make sure to cleanse any undead we see preemptively. Best not get overwhelmed by them. He was swiftly met with universal agreement. A wise choice, many would agree, and one that would prevent multiple skirmishes on their way. But it would soon hit a tiny little snag as they stepped into a large chamber surrounded on all sides by coffins. Empty coffins, with their contents currently standing ready for battle and staring at the invaders. Alor felt cold sweat run down his back as his mind sped up, hands already moving alongside his magicka. Walls burst from the ground, but not quickly enough as he heard the Draugr shout a mix of unrelenting force and frost breath. The multi-layered walls froze and were then struck with a wave of force, sending chunks of stone flying everywhere and throwing the entire group back into the previous chamber like a bunch of boneless ragdolls. All except one of them, that is, as the dust cleared to reveal the firmly standing form of Dagoth Ulthis, whose legs were encased in what looked to be liquid steel and his back supported by a wall of his own making. He nearly buckled as his spells ended and spat a glob of blood onto the ground from his now deformed helmet, a large potion already in his hand, as he glared at the undead, noir fucking abominations. He hissed as he threw the bottle onto the ground. The Draugr could barely react, as the Dunmer sped up beyond mortal limits and slammed into the closest one with the edge of his shield, breaking its neck with a crack and blocking its fellow's swift counterattack with his blade. He did not stop there, as he knew slowing down would mean death, and instead pushed on deeper into the crowd of the dead, cutting at their arms and legs and making sure to never stop moving, leaving them no chance to shout him apart, even as his bones screamed due to the exertion, protected by magic or not. Sadly for him, all it took to stop his advance was one misstep, and the backswing of a particularly aggressive Nord mummy struck him in the shoulder, throwing him off balance and sending him stumbling onto the cold stone floor. He rolled away immediately, saving his head from that very same axe and sending the undead flying with a wave of telekinetic might, one that drained his remaining reserves but bought him time to raise his shield and stop the following series of counterblows. Dagoth Ulthis was no fool, and neither was he ready to throw himself into pointless death, save to serve his lord and sovereign. And he smirked as his gut feeling was confirmed, his sight revealing his comrades rushing through the passage as he bought them time to heal themselves up. Like a madman certain of his way, he pushed forward, letting the haft of a warhammer land on his shield hand as he used the chance to stab through the neck of one of the more ornately armored Draugr, letting the blow carry him away from a war axe headed for his neck, even as his armor deflected other glancing blows. And that was all it took, for the familiar feeling of Alor's solar magic soon overtook the chamber, and the undead were drastically weakened, his human allies and the Altmer rushing in behind him to cut down the rest of them. Rarely did Ulthis feel such satisfaction at a plan working well, even one as haphazard as this one. Could his grace be influencing him even now? A pointless thought, he soon decided. "Oi, Ashlander," the Altmer called to him. "You still breathing over there?" Ulthis grunted in irritation. "I will take that as a yes." Marco felt his sword hand twitch in pain as he cleaved the Galder black blade through the final archer standing above the small waterway in the middle of the tomb. Swords were not the greatest weapons for facing undead, and stabbing into near-petrified flesh would wear any reasonable person down. Or so he comforted himself. "Oi, Marco," he heard Skirnir call from above. "Come and check this out." Poking the corpse one more time just in case, he rushed to join the rest of his group, all of them gathered around a traditional Draugr coffin. except this one was covered in some form of whitish-blue crystal that seemed to give off a small glow and a subtle chill to the air surrounding it. "Not any material I ever saw," Marco commented. Lydia, Junior, and Skirnir all collectively shook their heads, being pure fighters or close to it. Dagoth Ulthis, however, was raised in a mining settlement, and instead of immediately answering, he tapped the ice crystal a few times, before sniffing it and staring at it for a good 10 seconds. "Some kind of attempt at recreating ebony," he muttered. "Doubtful." Alor shook his head. "Looks more like the side effect of a ritual, likely for burial purposes." "Still, it is eerily similar in structure," Ulthis points out. "Not nearly as strong, of course. It is a much less metallic crystal," the Falmer notes, "and filled with magicka instead of the usual weight the trained senses pick up from ebony." "So a coincidence, then?" Marco pipes in. "Possibly." Alor shrugs. "We best gather some samples for Lord Dagoth's perusal. He is likely to be interested." "None of us brought the tools for it," Skirnir wisely points. "Just mark it on the map and we can extract it properly later." "Very well," the snow elf nods. "That is enough dawdling now. We best get moving." The party agrees, and they continue their descent south, having to fiddle through some locks and levers to open the way, but inevitably finding themselves before a large stone doorway. Skirnir went to open it, but was stopped by Marco as he pointed at a series of runes just above the passage. "Look there," he called. "Seems someone finally had the sense to leave behind a note." "Zakrisos?" Alor muttered and shook his head. "No, that isn't quite right." His eyes scanned the word structure once more, possibly Zakri and Sos. He frowns. "Swordblood? A Nordic honor name?" "500 septims, that is a dragon priest," Marco deadpans. Snorting, the Falmer directed him with a look so dry it made the undead look hydrated in comparison. "That is a fool's bet, and you know it." "Well then, what are we waiting for?" Skirnir grinned and pushed against the door. Not many things are as glorious as slaying one of Alduin's worshippers. 446, Kapitel 103, Bloodskal. Alor frowned as he followed the group into the core of the dungeon, as his lord liked to call places such as these, the walls within far less degraded than those without, having been left utterly undisturbed even with the Eastern Empire Company's rampant mining operations. He made an internal scoff at that. At least they weren't complete idiots. The burial chamber was eerily silent, no sound made save for the echoes of their own feet, and Skirnir's excited whispering, "Look there," he pointed, a dragon-word wall. A chuckle of almost childlike wonder left him unbidden. "It is like walking through history itself." He turned to his comrades, only to find them all distinctly unimpressed. "A word wall?" Marco drawled. "Yea? Oh, come on." Skirnir scoffed. "Where is your sense of adventure?" "Still here, rest assured." The Altmer smirked. "It's just—" "Word walls are kind of a dime a dozen," Alor cut in, half confused. "No, they are not." Skirnir spoke with disbelief. "Did you ever even leave your palace before the Civil War?" Marco teased in a half-whisper. "Did Daddy Stormcloak keep you nice and hidden?" Skirnir's face reddens for a moment before he huffs in frustration. "You just had to ruin this for me." Marco placed a hand over his heart. "Oh, don't be like that." "Silence," Aldous hissed. "I feel a gaze following us." As if they were a well-oiled machine, all levity abandoned the small group of dungeon crawlers as they rose their weapons and stood on guard, scanning the many enclosed coffins and going so far as to dedicate some attention to those covered in that odd icy crystal they discovered earlier. An entire 20 seconds passed before Marco, the hyperactive little shit that he was, spoke up. All this? That was his name, right? You sure you felt something? Do you question the wisdom of your allies at all times, fool?" The Ashlander hissed. "Stop your complaining and pay fucking attention." The coffin in the middle of the room shook with force, its covering bursting upwards as its inhabitant, a lich masked in a chitinous metallic visage, floated out of its confines, soon followed by his many servants abandoning their own resting places. "Tion," Ulthis finished in a distinctly flat tone. He considered letting his discipline go and going on a mad rant, but held back, and instead rushed the floating undead, heedless of the danger, going so far as to summon a bound spear and throw it at his target before it could reach for its staff fully. The lich hissed as he felt his bones crack and his arm snap away from his weapon, twisting around to the offender and blasting him with a wave of almost white scorching lightning, almost killing him instantly if not for his enchanted shield partially blocking the blow. The rest of the battle did not remain still either, as Lydia, Skirnir and Junior all rushed to their closest enemy and started attacking them before they could get their bearings, slaying many before the battle lines could even be properly established. Marco did much the same, except he contented himself with adding to the battlefield with an exciting tune or three, the bolts of lightning and waves of force, sound shearing, all who approached him being but side products, of course. Alor had more important and grand designs to concern himself with. He did not feel like getting smacked halfway across a cave system again, and his master's tendencies may have been rubbing off on him just a bit too much recently. He rose his hand, his silver spear shining gold as a large runic circle formed above him. A combination of the fundamental principles of mage light mixing with those of cloak spells to form a large ball of light that radiated positive energies across the entire chamber. The undead buckled under the sudden pressure, those of them who were too weak outright crumbling, while their mightier comrades found their every move feeling increasingly difficult, and the call of the afterlife that much more tempting. Draga fell all around them, Skirnir's battle cry causing even the dead to flinch away as Junior covered his back with a repeating crossbow. She, requisitioned from the jagged crown's hold, growing increasingly jealous with each bolt loosed into the eye socket of an unsuspecting enemy. Lydia's shield crushing bone and even weapons as she warded Alor from their approach, the Falmer fully focused on sapping the undeath from them one cursed fool at a time. And while all this was going on, Ulthis of House Dagoth battled with Zarkrisos, the bloody bladesman, a creature visibly hampered by lack of said blade, as it was forced to fight with only lightning and the occasional alteration-empowered kick. A combination that did not fare all too well against a veteran close-quarter-focused battle mage. Ulthis's every strike took chunks out of Zakrisos's desiccated form, even as the lich made him pay for every single one by lashing out with wide-reaching lightning storms, attacks not blockable from such a short distance. By the time the rest of the group was done cutting down the Draga, they all turned to face the Dragon Priest and Ashlander, only to see the latter charge through an empowered sparks wave, his shield deforming within his very grip as he rose a conjured hammer and slammed it into the undead's neck, breaking it and the ill-made creature with it. All this took a moment to glare at the ash-surrounded mask, just in case it decided to get up, and promptly let his mind shut down to escape from the blinding screams of pain coming from his every nerve. He felt his consciousness return as voices registered to his ears. "Is he always like this?" he heard the Altmer ask, half impressed and half horrified. The Falmer, or Alor, he reminded himself, he had earned that much respect at least, chuckled wryly. "Not my tale to tell, I am afraid." "Oh," the Nord man walked up to them. "Now you got me all curious." "A bad habit." Ulthis spoke up even as his voice healed, me and nearly a third of the army of Morrowind. He ignored the group's gawking as Alor tossed him a water skin. He barely caught it, drying it whole and exhaling in relief. "You trying to say the Dunmer turned suicidal?" The Nord half jested. "What did Flame Tongue do to you lot?" Ulthis immediately narrowed his eyes. "Do not dare speak to him of what I am about to say." He waited for all of them to nod, even as he doubted the Imperial would honor her word. "A good number of us have gained something of a—" He looked to Alor for help. "Immortality complex is what I believe the official term is," the helpful Falmer explained. "That," Ulthis scoffed. "Anyway, having constant access to high-level healing agents and powerful healers themselves made us all a little too daring to be reasonable." The Nord woman crossed her arms. "You charge into battle blindly, and yet you criticize yourself. What sense does that make?" "Let me finish, damn." He paused and narrowed his eyes. This one belonged to his lady's retinue. Best not insult her. "As I was saying, it is very much so a bad habit. We are all just trying to deal with it, without bothering the Hortator." He looks away. Complaining about it would be immensely ungrateful. Much to his surprise, he found the humans nodding in approval at his words, even as his two fellow mer felt more amusement than anything. Odd creatures the humans were, of that much Ulthis would forever be certain. At least the new lady had some Merish blood in her veins, he reassured himself. Dusting himself off, he accepted the Nordman's offer of help and was dragged up, just in time to see Alor patiently cleaning the mask of the undead. That thing any kind of useful. An odd smile formed on Alor's face, likely an inside joke of some sort, as he nodded. Indeed, it is a powerful boost to one's ability to wield lightning and resist it at once, even if the technique is rudimentary at best. Rudimentary? Marco blinked. Not what I'd expect from the dragon cult. Alor merely directed his enigmatic smile at the Ultma and smirked before tossing the mask to him. Put it on for now. No reason not to give ourselves a little boost, and you are the only focused electromancer present. Don't mind if I do, Marco sing-songed as he placed the mask over his head, finding he could see through it fully and feeling his very blood dance under the enchantment. Trippy. He muttered. The group slowly dispersed as they got to pillaging their rightful loot, and Alor took the time to record the writings on the word wall for later translation, catching an oddly imperceptible doorway out of the corner of his eye. He pointed it out to Ulthis, and they soon found themselves drawn to the half-illusion that was even now attempting to make them forget of the passage's presence. Being adventurous spirits all, they shuffled into the odd room, only to be stunned at the sheer difference it held from the rest of the dungeon, trading the harsh monolith-esque architecture of the Nords for a flowy ensemble of roots and pulsating, slithering tentacles, the latter being much, much more difficult to keep in one's attention for long. It took Alor all of 3 seconds to remember his master's warnings and commands. Out, he immediately barked, drawing looks of surprise. Get the fuck out now. The farmer was so distraught by what he saw that he ended up outright pushing his comrades out of the room before he summoned a set of heavy chains. His master tossed him offhandedly before they landed, throwing them onto the imposing book and seeing them clamp down on it in such a manner that it could not reasonably be opened without immense damage. A minute later, an uncharacteristically serious Alor stepped out of the room, chained book safely attached to his back, and immediately spoke. Do not look at the book. Do not think of the book. Do not smell the damned book. This is your only warning. As the rest of the party reeled, he faced Ulthis and spoke in rapid-fire Dunmeri. Priority is getting this into Lord Dagoth's hands. Nothing else matters. Ulthis nodded and wordlessly stepped in behind him, blade unsheathed and eyes alight with caution. I do believe that is my cue. A familiar voice had them all rounding to one of the crude ancient statues, the figure of one Davos of Dagoth, crouching atop it, visible only because he likely allowed it in the first place. Oh. Skirnir and Marco spoke as one. You didn't think you could evade notice, did you? Davos looked at them incredulously. All of you are either nobility or in the retinue of the leadership, not ringing any bells. Minthara's retinue looked mostly sheepish, save for Junior, while Raven's own servants did not react visibly. No fun, the lot of you. Davos rolled his eyes at Alor and Ulthis before jumping from his perch and landing without a sound. Come on then, if that thing is as dangerous as you are implying, we need to get out of here as quickly as possible, and I've already scouted away. Marco really felt like asking, but Alor's previous warning and the look of utmost seriousness on his face stopped him. Just as if not more, Alor confirmed Davos's words, lead the way. As if chased by something particularly vile, the group followed the Hortator's right hand away from the central burial chamber, passing a few corridors covered in freshly ashed undead, the only signs of their previous existence being the scorched remnants of their weapons and armor. They made a few extra turns and soon entered yet another chamber that stepped away from the usual mold, the carved mining passages and catacombs giving way to odd hexagonal rocks, joining into greater formations as they seemed to connect seamlessly with each other side by side. And the uniqueness did not end there, as the other end of the room was capped by a large gate, seemingly made out of stone that looked more like bark than sediment, filled with blood-like crystal and standing far too wide to be a simple tomb entrance. Was this cave some kind of sacred or ritual site? Alor thought absently before shaking the unnecessary curiosity away. He had other things to worry about now. Davos's jog slowed as he approached a glowing two-handed blade stabbed into an ancient fire pit. The skeleton next to it having obviously disturbed previously, and there it is. Davos spoke up, the blood-skull blade. "Did some snooping of your own?" Marco asked wryly. "Or did our dreadful prince already inform you of what to look for?" "Wouldn't surprise me if he had an idea, being perfectly honest." Davos let out a light snort and shook his head. "But no, this here unfortunate fella," he pointed at the skeleton, "had a diary with him before he died. Apparently lifting this fancy blade is what activated the Draugr, and he had enough time to scribble it all down before he died of starvation." "Coward," Skirnir scoffs. "He leave behind a name?" "Gratian Cairelius," Davos answers disinterestedly. "The miner upstairs will be quite interested in this, I suspect." "Aye?" Skirnir quirked an eyebrow, still feeling a bit miffed about the cowardly death of the man. "Give this a read." Davos tossed him the diary. "Might give you some perspective." The last Stormcloak grunted in agreement and put the booklet into his back pouch. "Hold on, Bloodskull," Alor muttered. "Zakrisos translated to Bloodsword. A possible connection?" "It was probably the heathen priest's blade." Ulthis spoke up. It felt like the creature was used to fighting with a staff and longsword from its stance. Its stumbling was only made worse by the recent awakening. "Makes sense." Alor nodded and turned back to Davos. "We can speculate on its owner later. We need to get moving." Thus satisfied, Davos turned to the gate and took up the large blade. The instant he did, lines lit up along certain parts of the edifice, and to the surprise of the group, he swung out, first to the sides and then vertically, sending out blasts of red magic and activating the locking mechanism. "Neat," he muttered as the gate opened and gave the sword a long look. "Might keep this thing if boss doesn't want it." "Doubtful he does," Alor piped in as he stepped Davos by. "Enchanting ranged attacks on swords is just inefficient." "More loot for me." The Dunmer grinned and followed after him. To their great surprise, what awaited beyond was not another sea of Draugr waiting to swarm them, but a wave of fresh ocean air, and the sound of the living speaking to each other in alarm as they no doubt heard the gate move. "Oh well," Davos chuckled. "Can't say I didn't expect this." And yet instead of looking frustrated or annoyed by the interruption, he merely grinned. Always nice to kill two enemies on one trip. His hand flashed far too quickly for mortal eyes to follow, and in a blink, the first Atronach summoned by his cautious foe was turned to ash. That it was a fire elemental didn't seem to bother the guildsman one bit. 487. Chapter 104, Earthing Oneself. Raven's point of view. We appeared within the walls of Raven Rock with barely a sound. The quiet Port Oj mining town turned bustling military garrison, failing to notice us, even as dozens of off-duty soldiers passed us by, even as they were meant to be on high alert. I narrow my eyes. Minthara pats my shoulder. "Give them a break. You can't expect them to be strung up the entire time." "Not the issue," I correct her. "Some of our followers are missing." "Trouble." She ever so slightly tenses. I allow my sight to expand, searching the near future for potential clues for a full minute before finding my target, safe yet touched by both trouble and the enemy. I blink and return to the present, shaking my head as I do. They should be fine, but if they do not return soon, I am going after them. She gives me a searching look. "If you are sure." "That I am." I force a disarming grin and begin walking. "Now let's go and startle the locals." I hear her clear her throat behind me and pause, my eyebrow raising in curiosity. She lightly kicks the large skull beside her and grins. I am still not carrying this. Of course, I deflate. Her clear amusement was worth a bit of a detour anyway. "I am afraid that whatever concerns you have will have to wait, citizen." The first councillor did not look up from his writing as we entered, his awed guards failing to so much as twitch as we passed them by. "Raven Rock is currently in a state of emergency, and I don't have the time to address petitions. You may submit your request to my second, or return at a later date, and I will not treat it as being late. Fair and honourable, I chuckle. His hand stills utterly as he ever so slowly raises his head. Ah, and promptly stands, Your Grace. And as if only just realizing I wasn't alone, he also greets Minthara, and Your Highness, forgive my disrespect, I was not aware of your return. His eyes twitch towards the doorway behind me with a subtle glare. Nobody was. I correct and wave for him to sit back down. We have just returned via teleportation, and I came to inform you that a strategy meeting will be taking place this evening, as we've made our first moves against the taint troubling your home. The man's shoulders shudder as if a massive weight had just been lifted off his shoulders. Those are encouraging news indeed. He bows his head, both towards myself and Minthara. The people of Raven Rock are forever in your debt. Holding back an eye roll, I wave my hand, though not dismissively. Don't speak of debts when it is our duty to act in the first place. The Redaran noble offers a small but genuine smile. Of course. That aside, Minthara interjects after a few moments of pleasant quiet. Did anything of note happen while we were gone? Leril looks at her, then directs a quick, curious glance my way. Before he speaks, a few brawls between the bored farmers and their hands. The fear had kept them in check before you arrived, but boredom is starting to set in now that they are safe. Unavoidable. I shrug. Indeed. He nods tiredly. I have my second dealing with such disputes, but I've had to direct more of the Redaran Guard to keep the peace as a result. There are over 500 of them, so almost all of my soldiers are necessary for the job if we count in the rest of the population. The Redaran Guard of Raven Rock was heavily undermanned, down to around 120 or so soldiers, so that statement wasn't all that surprising. That is unfortunate, I frown, and seeing his concerned look, I explain, we will need most of our forces for the second phase of pacifying the island. More peacekeepers means less fighters on the front line. I'd offer the dragon banner to keep the peace, but neither the people nor my followers would like that. Minthara shrugs apologetically. Leril gives her a quick nod of thanks. I cup my chin, considering everything before voicing my thoughts. I guess I will just have to ask Captain Fridvar of the Jagged Crown to move out of port and support the forces fighting along the coasts, leaving behind a few dozen more soldiers to man the walls should work if he agrees. As if he would ever say no. Minthara rolls her eyes. Don't be like that, my dear. I drawl and point upwards. It is the principle of the matter. She just nods indulgently and pats my shoulder. Leril pretends he sees nothing and exhales. My people will certainly prefer veteran Dunmer protecting them. No offense meant, of course. Minthara just waves him off and he goes on. As for other happenings, I do believe Lord Davos had spoken about some concerns, but that is all I know. Everything else is in perfect order. A Lord Davos who was currently missing. I frown but do not speak of it. Excellent. I grin at the elf instead. Thank you for your time, Counselor. I hope you get some rest. The evening is likely to be long. By your will, Your Grace. He bows and we leave. We did not immediately meet with the rest of our subordinates, instead moving to the manor given to us by Leril when we first arrived and barring ourselves into one of the larger rooms. All right then. Minthara clapped her hands and sat down in a meditative pose, waving for me to do the same. She stares at me for a long while, considering where to begin before frowning in frustration. Now, how did Master Parthenax make this look so easy? I can't help but snort. Just take your time, we are in no great rush. No great rush, huh? She deadpans. All I do is grin cheekily. She continues with her empty stare for a while longer before her draconic eyes sharpen and brighten. Earth. She speaks, and the room shudders just under the power of what one may call an earthquake. Goal, she repeats, and the room stills utterly, the fabric of reality seeming to firm around us, and all things coming into greater focus, as if their existence had become more weighty, sharpening as their metaphysical relevance, for the lack of a better word, increased. The result of which is greater magic resistance, old experience reminded. The first word of the shout you called Bend Will, Minthara went on, and utterly useless for the task itself, save for one minor detail. It makes one's self and their target as firm as the earth, thus resisting any attempt at making it otherwise, I quip. Her serious demeanor flickers as she begins to roll her eyes, but she stops herself. Focus. She half snaps, I will not waste hours fighting you just because my older brother got a lucky shout off. Did you really have to call him that? I deadpan, only mildly disgusted by the idea. Yes. She sasses back. Now shut up and listen to me, or I will turn this into resistance training. Her eyes sharpen dangerously, and I assure you the tests will not stop until I am satisfied. Challenged with such barbarity, nay treachery. What could a real man possibly do but, yes, dear, I am sorry, dear, please enlighten me of your great ways, dear. In the end, she did end up testing the shout against me, ostensibly to test her theory that it really was just resistance the first word offered, but in truth my teasing may have gotten just a bit too far when I refused to explain what stoned meant, as she was explaining the difference between goltz and gol. Goltz being stone instead of earth. It worked just as advertised, even if I did deactivate my shroud for the attempt, but being the little shit that I was, I pretended to fall under her control and dimmed my eyes to look like a brain-dead zombie while giving her a soulless stare. She almost fell for it, but one did not consume the wisdom of a dragon and direct it all into a word of power without understanding its nuances, and I was promptly frozen into a block of ice, save for my head, and she proceeded to pout at me for a full 10 minutes while the ice melted. Honestly, how did she expect me to stop when she made it so fun? 5 hours later, we were still seated on the stone floor, staring intently at each other as Minthara revised her own understanding and I internalized all she had spoken of. Had I still been a ye-old mortal, I don't doubt this would have taken me days or even weeks. The concept so easily grasped by someone with a dragon soul would simply slip off a lesser mind like so much gibberish. The greybeards, for all their dedication and understanding, would have immense trouble internalizing something that was so beyond them even their religion would possibly protest it. I was not a mortal, however, neither in soul or mind, and my experience with metaphysics surpassed Minthara's by an order of magnitude, stolen soul knowledge or not. The weight of a soul and its impermeability was a subject that I was well and truly masterful in. All these factors combined, including the fact my soul was paradoxically adaptable because of my status as unbound, meant that I could internalize and accept the meaning of a word and project it into existence without spending years on understanding it. All it took was but one afternoon. That was not to say that the effort was greatly lessened. In fact, many of those factors merely served to permit it to occur to a dragonless soul in the first place. Everything else was deep meditation and subjective days of effort condensed into hours. The word finally clicked, and Minthara's eyes instantly focused on me, my soul surging, or momentarily jerking to be more accurate, towards my throat as I spoke the deceptively complex word goal. The wave of sickly orange came as expected, but the effect it had on the space around us was like a candle compared to Minthara's bonfire, even as the effect within came much closer to that ever-distant goalpost. My already odd soul was made even weirder as I felt it become both more malleable and unyielding at the same time, the former permitting me greater access to magics tied to it, while the latter protected me from others who tried to meddle. An appreciable amount of progress indeed. And the system agreed. Expert tongue, Uwam, master tongue. Such a long road it was. I mutter to myself, feeling a bit wistful at the sudden confirmation. Minthara perks up, curiosity and concern in her eyes. Did it protect you like it did me, or do we need to spend more time on it? Her gaze softens briefly. No need to rush things if you aren't ready. No, it worked perfectly. I raise my hand and smile. It's just... I shake my head. It has been quite a long time since I sat on the walls of Winterhold practicing my first words, and today's lesson reminded me of just how much effort that took. Ah, she blinks before smiling brightly. Well, we can always go through more words if you feel like it. She looks away, face ever so slightly reddening, and mutters, "It was nice to finally teach you something." As if I could ever say no to that, it would be this poor student's greatest pleasure, I bow dramatically and grin. Her smile was the sun, even if it was smothered almost instantly as she got up. "It is getting quite late, isn't it?" "Yes." I nod. Shouldn't you check on our missing friends? She asks, hesitation radiating off her. In an instant, I am on my feet. Shit, I lost track of time. I stop myself and turn to her, drawing a confused look before I came in for a quick peck and gave her a wink. Don't worry, we will get back to yelling at each other later. She huffs, trying to hide her eagerness. I will hold you to that. The moment we stepped out of the room, the eyes of the elite guards made up of Sworn Myr and the Dragon Banner, who just happened to form up as they realized we were back, turned to us. Any news of Davos and Stormcloak? I ask the closest elf. I don't believe so, Your Grace. He bows his head. We are keeping an ear out for the news, but none have come so far. Fine. I go to voice my intent to search for them, but feel a woodsman appear in the nearby shadows. Your right hand returns from the mines, O Chosen. The voice echoes in such a way that only I may hear it, and the agent disappears. Well, that simplified matters. The group looked less than fine. At least you idiots are alive. I point out dryly as they are looked over by a patient pair of Falmer, the black book they secured now firmly under my wards and bound to my back until Akulakan returned. My thoughts returned to their battered states. All they would ever need to do was come back alive, and the consequences would not matter one bit. But that did not mean I wouldn't make them squirm for it. Don't look at me, boss. Davos shrugs, the sword Bloodskull resting on his thighs. I just followed after them. He points a thumb at the rest of the group. Couldn't leave them to die and all that. Some grumbling ensues as blame is thrown about, Alor and Ultis blaming Minthara's posse, and the ladies of said group blaming Marco, who not so obviously redirected all of it to Skirnir. All Stormcloak had to say was, "It worked, didn't it?" Palm Meat Face nods. I sigh, yes, it did work. Did you at least find anything beside a fancy sword? Minthara asks dryly. Aye, Dragonborn. Skirnir grins. The entire mine is full of ebony, and now that the Draga have been dealt with, it is free for use. That is quite worthwhile, I point out hesitantly. Exactly. The nod booms to my immediate regret. We also found an exit that leads to a hidden cove, formerly, filled with reavers and some fancy magical ice rocks that seem to be akin to ebony, or at least so the clever ones say. He points his thumb at Alor and Ulthis. I raise an eyebrow at them, and Alor answers, an ice magicka charged facsimile to ebony, or so it appears at least. We did not have the tools necessary to excavate it, so we left it behind. Stalhrim, was it? Wise of you. I nod and look to the rest of them for an uncomfortably long time. Well, I can't say I am all that thrilled about the risks you all took, but neither can I say you were entirely wrong to take them. I turn to Minthara, who nods. I will let you off the hook this time, but only because you secured a critical asset for the campaign, even if by accident. What is that book anyway? Marco asks. Something not relevant to you. I immediately retort. Ah, he blinks. Daedric fuckery, understood, sir, please don't tell me. He salutes lazily and promptly does his best to forget all about it. Thus satisfied, I prepare to go on, but the blade sitting on Davos catches my eye. You want this one, boss? He asks, without a hint of hesitation. My eyes narrow as I scan the enchantment. That a fucking sword beam enchantment? I mutter. His eyes glint with mirth. Yup. I snort. Fuck that. As I leave, I hear Marco grumble to himself before tossing a bag of septims to Alor. I never said I wouldn't check the sword out, but the expectant look on the Altmer's face was too difficult to miss. And letting him off the hook wouldn't be all that sporting of me, now would it? Shaking my head, I unfurl the note Davos tossed me without anyone looking and immediately frowned. What is it? Minthara asks. Molly has begun to act. I inform her. Someone tried stabbing the Telvanni guarding the dragon scorpions. She narrows her eyes. So he is finally making a move, is he? Yup, I incinerate the note. All that means is we have to move even harder. Had anyone been observing us, they would see the bloodthirsty looks on both our faces. Another day dawned as preparations for the advance continued, the previous evening's meeting quick and to the point. Much to my chagrin, serving merely to begin the move and not direct it as mine, and the elite's speed was far too great for the rest to organize. As I approached the emptied retching Netch Corner Club, I could feel the invisible struggle between my own patrons and Mora, who grew increasingly curious about what I was doing, his pressure growing with each passing hour. We weren't chasing after him. "Don't worry, you failed calamari dish. I will be coming for you soon." I glared at the skies before shaking my head and entering the half-underground building. Within awaited the vast majority of my subordinates, all of them standing around a large table with an impeccably precise map of the island and its contents placed upon it. Everyone, save for Minthara, straightened their backs as I entered, and none spoke as I walked up to the map. I looked around, meeting the eyes of every single person present, before speaking with all the authority I possessed, natural or otherwise. Let us begin. 488, Chapter 105, The Scouring of Solstheim. The sun had already reached its zenith by the time the meeting came to an end. Lines were drawn, routes planned, supplies drafted, and inspiring words shared, the latter utterly unnecessary even as I spoke them. My subjects knew why we were here, or at least they knew enough to understand the importance of the mission, and the Nords of the Dragon Banner needed no motivation save for the chance to participate at all. And yet the act had grown on me, as ridiculous as the very idea sounded. General point of view. His lord's words echoed through Varen of House Dagoth's mind as he marched at the head of his formation, his 300 Silrune Fell elites, joined by 100 veteran Nords and a few dozen Indoril knights, all of them blooded in war and battle. They marched northwards into the mountain passes and fjords to hunt and cut down every beast, cultist and creature that would threaten the land and expunge their taint from existence. The world saw what happened when my people were threatened once already. He spoke, his air that of rule incarnate. It would seem the lesson has yet to stick. The Hortator's eyes darkened, as did his tone, and that just will not do. He paused for but a moment, his eyes meeting those who followed him. Solstheim is a domain of Morrowind, and the last fools who thought they could run roughshod over land under my aegis tasted but ash and flame. And no creature, worm or god will escape this just punishment. None doubted the ridiculous words spoken as he rose his hand and pointed it at them all. And so I order you thus: scour the island, slay all who stand against you, but save those who can still be saved. When we leave after our work, let only certainty remain, that those who stand against us may await only death and despair. You good there, lad? A voice jerked Varen from his recollection. He kept his reaction from showing and slowly turned to the ginger Nord man beside him. Yes, Volkmar? One of the more renowned champions of the Dragon Banner patted his shoulder with enough strength to buckle a weaker elf. Just thought to tell you we are closing in on the altar thingy. Momentarily, Varen thought to rebuke him for voicing his distraction aloud, but in the end decided against it and merely shook his head. Nords were rarely ill-intentioned about such things. Get your fellows ready. His Grace said the enemy has begun taking control of trolls and other beasts, now that his influence is diminished. I was there to hear it. Volkmar gives him a searching look. You sure you are good? Varen jerked his hand up to forestall any further questions. Don't worry about it. Well, if you say so. The Nord frowns before slowly turning and walking away. The Dunmer stares off into the distance once more before scoffing and shaking his head. Get your head out of the clouds, boy. If Orin was here, he'd slap your ears off. He took a deep breath and turned to face his men. Soldiers, make ready. As one, the troops he cared for formed up with perfect accuracy. That the Nords took a few moments longer to gather was a nice balm on his worried mind. Indoril Nerevar looked on as his new vampiric friend, chatted with the pack leader of the werewolves they met recently, their leader Majni making an admirable effort at resisting his instincts before the ultimate predator as he attempted to barter for their help. Well, it was more like he and Volkihar had already butchered every single werebear they met on accident and were trying to get something out of the act from the vengeful yet surprisingly peaceful pack of werewolves. Nerevar couldn't help but snort. This island is just as fucked up as I remember. He chuckled. Serana's ears perked up, but she continued her negotiation, and only after 5 minutes more did she approach Nerevar's spot in the shade. They agreed to serve as guides so long as we put in a good word with the conquerors. The quotations were very audible. Not like they'd be of much use if they wanted to fight, werewolves or not. Nerevar shrugged. Packs like these were usually too disorganized and focused on hunting for actual military missions. Kid will probably employ them as gamekeepers or something, so they probably shouldn't worry. Going to make that recommendation? Serana quirked an eyebrow. He shrugged. If they prove themselves. Once more her ears perked up, and she turned vaguely northeast. I hear battle, she muttered before turning to the werewolf. Majni. She called, are you hearing this? The werewolf frowned before sniffing the air. Aye, sounds like a right big scuffle that. We should probably check that out. Nerevar pipes in. The werewolf frowns. Our agreement was to serve as guides. Serana's resulting smirk made all the dozen or so gathered Hersonites shiver. It is cute that you think I would need your help. The poor puppies were silent, as the grave before the leader gathered some of his guts and made an audible gulp. There is the altar of Thrond up north before a cave entrance. Some witches took refuge there, but with all the madness going on, I don't rightly know if they are still there. Excellent. Serana smirked, showing off her fangs. Lead the way then. Hopefully the fun won't be over before we arrive. Hunter willing, the half-beast mutters half-heartedly. None of them noticed the imposing automaton standing just to Nerevar's side, watching over them like a hawk. Vels Carvani took a long gulp of his personal stash of sujama, taking a comfy seat on a large square rock as the small swarm of automaton spiders he was given got to work unearthing the circle of rock and earth before him. Kolbjorn Barrow, eh? The far too toothy mage mused. I do so wonder what secrets you contain, that monster would specifically seek you out. Azadal was it. Tasked as he was with the unearthing and instructed to protect his mind, the Telvanni master felt himself salivating at the prospect of a good find and further advancements of his own arts. Let the mortals campaign around and play at conquerors. This is where the real victory was won. Skirnir Stormcloak stared at the woman, utterly dumbfounded. So tell me if got this right. His voice was utterly flat even before all. He waves his hand round to indicate the whole island. This. You got so utterly drunk and comfortable in your mead hall that accursed Reiklings managed to take a Nord village to the sword. Those of the dragon banner behind him silently bristled with each word he spoke. Even the Dres and Sadras troops that followed after him were indignant, hidden as their disgust was. Bujold of Thurk, the mead hall and the village surrounding it, shuffled on her feet before frowning and glaring daggers at him. And since when do we have to account ourselves to you? You barge in here like a brigand and expect us to just prostrate ourselves, is that it? Yes, Skirnir answered instantly. My name is Skirnir Stormcloak. Some of the Thurskers startled. Of the dragon banner, representative of Crown Princess Minthara Septim, the Dragonborn. Now even Bujold looked worried. Skirnir took a few threatening steps forward and jabbed his finger into the bridge of her nose, causing her to take a step back in turn. Now here is how this is going to go. He moved his hand to point at her belt. You either pick up your sword, follow us back to your village, and do your utmost to slaughter the little beasts. His eyes narrowed as his hand slowly moved to the sword on his belt. Or you refuse, and I send you to the ancestors myself, by carving your lungs out of your back. The woman paled, but Skirnir pressed. Am I understood? She shook and, not trusting her voice, merely nodded rapidly. Before he could go on and calm them down, now that they were tentative allies, however, a distinctly irritating melody reached them from the north, and the familiar figure of Marco stepped over the rise, strumming his lute as his magic shimmered behind him. His serene expression shifted as he realized he had reached his destination, turning from serene to utterly terrified as he began running. Stormcloak, get your men ready. The spell worked a bit too well. Skirnir grinned, excellent. Just in time as well, as the jagged crown should be closing in from the east of the camp. He stepped before his reforming soldiers, uncaring that their formation would not be perfectly ordered, and began breathing deeply. He felt the earth shudder as numerous small legs rushed towards the source of the spell that so irritated them, and just as the first blue head crested the rise above the Thurska's camp, Skirnir Stormcloak took in a deep breath, his eyes turning manic as he remembered the lessons he was awarded for his deeds and loyalty, and he shouted, "FUS!" The air cracked as dozens of the goblinoids were launched back, and he charged forth freely, his sword raised high and a war cry on his lips, uncaring that even his own people were scared shitless. The way of the voice may be the path of the wise, but it is the way of the dragon that ruled the land. Storn Cragstrider stood beside his daughter atop a clear rise above Thursk's mead hall that gave a perfect view of their distant cousin's camp, and the current face of a battle so utterly one-sided that he almost felt pity for the Rakelings. "Another tongue," his daughter Freya gasped. "It is as I feared." Storn spoke gravely as he saw the forces of his erstwhile visitors utterly butcher all that stood before them. "They will not leave this island once they are done." His daughter looked at him aghast. "Truly?" The elf made no secret of it. Storn sighed, "And I fear we can do nothing to stop them." Hot-blooded as his daughter was, she would still remain shaman after him, and so instead of panicking or lashing out, she closed her eyes and thought deeply of his words. And yet, no matter how many times she thought it over, the conclusion would remain one and the same: fuck. Before he could chide her, Storn felt the air shudder, both as one of the Allmaker stones was released and a beast roared in the skies, its dreadful voice descending towards the battlefield at blinding speeds. "We must help them," Freya said immediately. And for all his growing resentment, Storn could only agree, "Allmaker guide our path." He nodded and readied his axe. Minthara strolled away from the freshly freed Waterstone, kicking away the loose stones thrown about by the feeble lurker that appeared once she had done her work, and humming happily as she did, followed closely by Lydia and Junior, who she decided needed a bit of fresh air. No matter how happy she was with her progress, though, a thought refused to leave her. "This is all kinds of suspicious," she muttered. "What is it, my lady?" Junior asked, hand instinctively reaching for a short sword. "No resistance," Minthara pointed out. "No resistance at one of his most important anchor points." "A scheme, then," Lydia nodded. "Without a doubt." The Dragonborn agreed, before utterly ruining the serious moment by pouting, "I really need to learn to teleport soon, or Raven will keep having all the fun." Her two followers could only smile wryly, even as the roars of dragons echoed across the island. "Wari, Raven's point of view." The book on the dark forest slammed shut as I felt a presence descend upon me specifically, the familiar power of Hermaeus focusing on hobbling me in every way that mattered for the day's operations. It would not be an overstatement to say I was rendered completely and utterly incapable of seeing what was going on the island. I let out a wry chuckle, feeling the good Daedra already working to counter him. "This is all kind of sad, my dear overgrown mollusk. We've already been through this song and dance a few times already." My face twisted into a grin. "You think to cage me, to damage my followers, by slowing me for but a moment." "Sadly for you," I rose a hand, "I don't need to see to act," and snapped my fingers, activating the mark I placed on Varan. General point of view. Serana kicked the now headless troll away from her, splattering the thing and barely stopping herself from a quick feast, as she realized the battle around her was dying down, and she really didn't feel like explaining herself to those not in the know. She saw Raven's commander walk up to her and bow slightly. "Lady Volkihar." Varan spoke, "I thank you for coming to our aid. Those Briarhearts were unexpected." His mask hides a wince, his heartbeat does not. "Our new friends did tell us this place was full of witches." Serana nudges her chin towards the pack of werewolves currently doing their best to hide in the foliage local allies. She explained before the question could even be asked. "Very well." Varan nodded after looking them over. "And the rest of your group?" he asked. Serana smirked and merely pointed at the small walled cave to her left, just in time for said wall to explode under the force of a flying hagraven, Akulakan's blurring form following soon after as he proceeded to rechristen his glaive by impaling the witch into the mountainside with a gloriously violent throw. Just after him came Nerevar, dragging with him another limp archwitch and humming an annoyingly half-memorable tune. He went to speak, but Serana felt a tingle at the edge of her senses, and looked up, just in time to see a trio of exceedingly silent dragons hurtling towards them. She licked her lips at the thought of the feast, the memories of dragon hearts filling her mind utterly. So utterly she did not notice Varan stumble as another figure materialized next to him. So that was his plan, huh? Raven muttered, thus promptly startling the shit out of her. She directed a flat look at her friend, to which he, of course, only grinned. Right. Don't let the smug shit steal all the kills now, dragon hearts later. She nodded to herself and prepared for battle. 489, Chapter 106, Miraak's Gambit. Raven's point of view. My perception slowed to a crawl as I wasted no time in levitating upwards and summoning Scorch, the three dragons immediately shifting their flight paths as they noticed me and moving to keep their distance while still remaining in range to shout at my forces. A damaging tactic to be certain, but not a winning one, no matter how much hit and run the scaly fuckers committed themselves to. Which meant this was a distraction. The eastern flank of the expeditionary force was currently clearing out Thurk Mead Hall. The center flank was right under me, and the western flank was currently trudging through Reichling caves, clearing out Kstag's castle, and thus protected from potential dragon ambush. Did it need to be a dragon ambush specifically, though? I frowned minutely. No, any lesser forces would not be guaranteed to succeed against the veterans serving me. And the western flank was led by Ulthis, Faran, and Alor, two of whom pretty much grew up with tunnel fighting as their very lifestyle. East it is then, I muttered, not even bothering to consider Minthara a potential target. She was not in danger, she was the danger. All in all, I now knew the true target of this distraction. A distraction I couldn't ignore because they would kill hundreds of my subjects. Well then, I rubbed my hands as Scorch began exponentially increasing in size below me. At least you are finally playing the game, eh, Miraak? Mora's interference meant I couldn't really feel his potential reaction, but I was willing to bet a good third of my brandy the fucker heard me. Too bad I wasn't about to let myself be outmaneuvered. But how did one deal with a well-thought-out trap? Simple, really. They walked straight through it. Crine. I spoke softly to the air, the word command echoing with all the weight of its recipient. Your wayward brothers are looking to have a talk. General point of view. Within the winding and mind-numbingly complex halls of Apocrypha, the domain of Hermaeus Mora, all was silent. Or at least it appeared thus to the man currently pacing in front of a large mirror, taller than his own tall form, and immaculately built and enchanted to show what his own eyes could not see. So long had he listened to the bubbling of the many pools of ink and the shuffling of parchment to even register it anymore. Before him, two battles unfolded, one to his domain's north, where he sent three of his kin to serve as a distraction, led by Cruziakrell, a rare example of competence in their collective family. The first dragonborn, or at least the first known to man, as he had ensured, watched as his youngest sibling's pet elf appear in his centermost formation, rushing to aid his own troops before any others, as Miraak had predicted. What Miraak did not in fact predict was said elf floating into the air, summoning a fiery bird that rapidly grew to the size of a small dragon, and then summoning a dragon that looked too similar to his attire not to be bound to him in some way. And of course the elf guessed he was watching him within mere seconds. It would seem I underestimated you, Miraak admitted bitterly, words he would never speak were he not alone. No matter, this just means Saratar will need to do his work faster. He turned to the other end of the mirror, displaying a shoreside campsite currently stuck in heated battle. The mostly Nordic force was holding its ground well, but even the pathetic beasts he enthralled for the task managed to kill a few before being slaughtered like the vermin that they were. His gaze moved to the west of the encampment, up the cliffside, and towards his sole remaining locus upon Solstheim. Sacrificing the Waterstone to distract his sibling by launching raids and assassination attempts from its position was a bitter meal to swallow, but Miraak was rapidly losing his window of opportunity, and Mora would inevitably take notice soon enough, if he had not already. Throwing the accursed thought to the darkest recess of his mind, the ancient man's gaze reached his target, his sole remaining stone, the beast stone, hidden under mounds of earth in an attempt to keep it obscured unlike the rest, and housing the last remnants of his true cultists. For they were not thralls, but true followers, and ones who would use the potent souls of the small army as sacrifice to rip open a way for him to escape. Not the wisest way to escape, for it would carry consequences to his very being, but the only one remaining to him now. He sent forth a burst of power that was lessened to but 1/100th of its truth before reaching his followers, and they all rose and began moving as one. With the wave of a hand, Miraak's gaze returned to his dragon, who rushed to freeze the warriors whose souls would fuel his emancipation, only to himself freeze as he saw a large ship that was moments ago hidden by the cliffside. Miraak snarled, his ire rising. "I do not need complications now," he hissed. "Saratar." His voice ignored such petty things as space and barriers as he commanded his servant, "I want those sacrifices ready, no matter the cost." He would have his freedom this day, no matter what he had to give up to get it. Skirnir's shield cracked the goblinoid warchief's skull with a wet thud, sending the little bastard sprawling into the snowy dirt before decapitating the furious, vaguely female creature, trying and failing to stab through his sabaton. He turned to observe the battlefield, but instinct told him to look up just in time to see a vile-looking snake dragon rushing down towards him. No, it was rushing to the greatest number of his men. "Scatter!" he roared, even as he kept slaying, but his words were far too little, far too late, as the dragon was already far too close, and the battle lines far too dense for any true reaction to what was about to happen. Sanisi, Skirnir prepared to watch hundreds die, only to hear the dragon roar, "Ease, Slen Nuss," and freeze both Reichling and person, leaving behind but a limited few of those lucky enough to be missed, stranded and alone. Thankfully, the sudden assault was all it took to finally break the Recklings, and the few who still stood turned tail ran. The last Stormcloak grunted at the cowards, but also thanked them, as he could now focus fully on the beast. A quick search revealed its position as it swept low to grab one of the Sadra's marksmen that managed to strike its wing. After it had already seen to the trio of Nords who tried taunting it into attacking them. The elf managed to roll away from the Moors, but as the dragon landed, the mere shudder of the ground sent the marksman sprawling and left him easy prey for the dragon's claws. Skirnir tried summoning a burst of unrelenting force once more, but all he felt in response was his throat burning in agony. All he could do as the elf was devoured was roar like a madman as he thrust forth with his sword, stabbing the dragon in its already disfigured jaw and forcing it to spit out the bifurcated hero. He was batted away like a fly, but a moment later, the dragon roaring at him with fury, "Your soul!" It growled, "My master will want it." "Your master, eh?" Skirnir forced himself to stand, even as his legs trembled, the corner of his eye tracking an approaching silhouette. "You can tell your fucking master." The Nord spat on the ground, "that he can come and take it himself." The dragon's eyes narrowed into pinpricks, and it rushed to rend him apart, his master's orders be damned. Just in time for the jagged crown to calm itself off the coast and release a salvo of its ship-mounted artillery. Sahratar roared in pain and confusion as he felt his right be pierced with spear-sized arrows, sending him veering off from his target and crashing into the mound of ice of his own making, no doubt slaying dozens of the intended sacrifices with his sheer weight. He rounded on the ship, his fury so blinding he ignored all pain and focused the whole of his zeal into his words, "Fuse, Rodar!" He roared, and the jagged crown was sent skidding across the seas, its sails utterly ruined while its hull barely held itself together by its many protective enchantments. Such furious focus would cost the dragon, however, as felt the ever-familiar sting of a blade in the bottom of his jaw, the sensation reaching him just in time to rear back before his brain could be pierced by the enchanted weapon, even if his neck was well and truly bursting with blood, covering his assailant utterly. But such a wound would not slay a Dover, and even if he could not shout himself whole, he would still heal in time, unlike the little mortal. A loud snap echoed across the now silent battlefield, and Skirnir Stormcloak fell bonelessly to the ground after being launched straight into the cliffside with force enough to bend steel. Sahratar stalked the corpse ground, finishing off any potential assassin with extreme prejudice as he awaited. his master's soothing words echoing in his mind as he fought against the roaring pain in his throat, taking away the thing a dragon treasured most. The shuffling of feet drew Sahratar's attention, and he rounded on the approaching figures, a 24 or so magi and accompanying warriors dressed in his master's cult's attire. "Great Sahratar," the lead shell-faced man bowed, "I see your glorious conquest has brought you pain. Please allow us to aid you." The dragon half growled, half gurgled as one of the cultists approached him, the telltale glow of healing magics appearing between his hands. The cultists were elated to be able to aid one of their great teacher's servants. So elated, in fact, that they failed to notice movement near the cliffsides. Without any true warning, the battlefield was overtaken with blinding and deafening blue lightning as it forked to strike both the healer and Sahratar, utterly disintegrating the former while striking the latter in the head, snapping it backwards and making the dragon suspiciously still. The remaining cultists blinked the light from their eyes and rounded on their assailant, weapons ready for battle, only to stop dead in their tracks. Why was an elf wearing the mask of Dragon Priest, and why was he steaming as if he had just melted his way out of an ice block? The more perceptive of their number noticed a slowly disintegrating scroll flying off to his side. They would have noticed more, but unlike in the case of a certain demigod, thinking was not a free action. That single moment of hesitation cost them, as the elf rose a lute of all things and began strumming it, the ensuing melody scratching against their minds even as more lightning descended upon them, battering against ward or body and reaping even more lives as Miraak's students threw themselves into battle in a blinding rage. For all his power, the elf would fall to their numbers. Of that there was no doubt. Marco felt his heartbeat drumming in his ears as he blocked spell after spell and somehow managed to stumble his idiot head out of the way of a crossbow bolt, only having it scrape against Zakriso's mask as he stabbed the closest cultist through the throat, his lute swiftly discarded in favor of another scroll that served to rise a cloak of lightning around him. The mask's power continued to surprise him as he fought, as even without his focus, he could still fry the weaker cultists alive in seconds, making what should be an instant and overwhelming bout of elf stabbing an actual fight as he kept giving ground and healing his wounds with every successful strike of his sword. But even then, the odds were still well and truly stacked against him. A misaligned slash here had him losing more ground than he could give. An overeager stab had him surrounded and wounded before he could defend himself, and a desperate lunge and tumble left him out in the open, exactly in the path of a staff-wielding mage whose glare he could feel through the mask he bore, his focus nearly bursting with the lance of fire he was preparing. For the first time since coming to the quaint place that was Solstheim, Marco of Solitude felt like he was in actual danger, and he knew it to be his final realization before he was blasted apart. Such thoughts disappeared as he saw a burly old Nord rush from the nearby shrubbery and promptly bury his axe into the mage's spine, a younger woman that looked vaguely like him doing the same to another cultist next to the other. Marco couldn't help but laugh as he turned on his pursuers and without a care in the world called out, "Your father smells of elderberries." The shield-bearing cultist in the lead shuddered as blood began leaking through his ears. That distraction was all it took for Marco to bury the golder black blade into his neck and gorge himself on the abundant life force. The rest fell in short order, leaving behind a silent battlefield, 1 Altmer and 2 Skarl. Raven's point of view. The cowardly little shits had already kited me all the way to Fort Frostmoth. By the time I felt a shift in the air around them, the 2 heavily bloodied dragons fleeing through a rip in reality that was nearly identical to Mora's own brand of interdimensional bullshit, except with a draconic twist to it. Scorch squawked with indignation, and Krynar Voken merely landed onto the beach, realizing that the battle had been won. It was only the 3 of us now, Serana having taken quite the blast of fire when she finished off the first little shit and thus remaining behind to heal, and no doubt gorge herself since the dragon fell into a hidden crevice. I was even nice enough to instruct Akulakan to ward it for her, so Miraak couldn't get his snack back. Frowning at the cowardly little shits that escaped me, I couldn't help but respect the sheer spite it would take to force dragons to abuse whirlwind sprints to stay just beyond my own shouting range for what felt like fucking hours. It was 15 minutes, which may as well be an eternity. It was irritating, but I'd probably do the same. I can mope later. I end the train of thought and turn to Crine. We will catch up later. I need to see if there is anything left of the other army. Can't have the fucking mollusk worshipper getting one over me. The black and golden dragon hummed as he leaned his head onto his crossed arms, lowering himself onto the beachside to no doubt enjoy the ambience. Thuri, is all he said. Nodding, I snapped my fingers and yanked onto the mark I placed on Marco. General POV. Miraak's very soul shook with fury as he observed his final attempt fall apart in front of him, utterly powerless to salvage anything but two of his most worthless servants. The air around him shuddered, the shelves shaking and priceless tomes ripping and turning to dust as he simply glared at his mirror for 5 entire minutes. Finally able to calm himself, his gaze moved to Saratar, his most loyal and powerful dragon, and he permitted himself a sigh as he spoke. Saratar, Zeal Los Di. Before he could finish the shout and death sentence, he felt the connection disappear, his mirror showing the elf glaring at the dragon, now bound in spiked chains, just barely among the living. He would rage further if he could, but a presence appeared behind him, one he would never grant the satisfaction of seeing him break. Miraak, his patron's disgusting slurping voice, came from behind him. It would seem that your pathetic flailing has invited trouble upon my domain. The ancient dragonborn stopped his hand from shaking and turned to face the amorphous pile of eyes and tentacles. Indeed, he answered simply. Thousands of eyes narrowed at him, some flashing with calculation, others with fury, and yet Mora remained outwardly calm. Unfortunate outcome of your foolish rebellion. Miraak knew the implication behind those words, and yet he did not give his mas patron the satisfaction of reacting to it. He sought to betray the parasite, and the parasite sought to scheme his demise while replacing him. That he was the sole dragonborn reachable in many long years was the sole reason his soul remained his own. A reason that had recently been threatened. A reason that disappeared just as quickly as his sister brandished their father's amulet. And Mora knew this, and knew it well. Back to the eternal game it is, Miraak concluded, and met the infinite eyes. Betrayal or not, you still need me. Arrogance, Mora snarled, the fury washing over the man once more without reaction. But even arrogant, you remain a useful tool. The tentacles wriggled discomfortingly, and I am loath to waste a good tool. Wise of you, Miraak glared from under his mask. Master? The eyes blinked, narrowed, widened, and glared. See to it that you do not forget your place again. A tome flopped onto the floor below the blob, its thick covers black and green, a small gift. The Daedra spoke, take heed of its contents, and ready yourself for the inevitable attack. Miraak nearly gasped at this, barely managing to hide his reaction as he stared at the tome, the colors of which appeared to be dancing against each other. He had not been given a thing from his patron in centuries, and the creature certainly did not grow generous in that time, which meant he was actually worried. Miraak's eyes narrowed. Thank you. He bowed. Master. The eyes stared at him for an eternity and but an instant, and slowly began to dissolve. As his master left him to his thoughts, Miraak came to a conclusion. His enemy, infuriating as he was right about one thing: fucking mollusk. 490, Chapter 1, 107, Closure and Next Steps. Raven's point of view. My foot tapped the freshly unfrozen sand below me as I stared at the bound serpentine dragon with a fair bit of irritation in my eyes. The creature was no doubt just as miffed as I, being bound in barbed chains as he was, even if that fact brought little relief. On the one hand, the little shit killed around 3 dozen of my men and froze most of the rest, while planning to no doubt do unspeakable things to them later. Considering its master's patron, I'd best leave that particular train of thought. Anyway, on the other hand, he was mind-controlled into doing all of it, and it wasn't mere illusion that did the controlling either, but a straight-up soul-based reality manipulation attack. What to do with you? I mutter mostly to myself, causing the dragon to hurt himself further as he raged against his bindings. Rather quickly, I found myself moving towards the only sensible solution. Truly, there was but one decision any real man would make. I could just leave the judgment call up to your sibling. Pausing before I turned away from the suddenly silent beast, I pulled out blasphemy. Well, I suppose I can give you a bit of relief, even if you might die anyway. I lay the sword atop the dragon's snout, and his entire form is overtaken by grey flame, the bond to Miraak within him fighting and raging against me, but failing utterly to repulse my divinely enhanced blade. By the time I stepped away, his pupils had narrowed into pinpricks, and he turned utterly still in his bindings. Offering the poor fucker an only slightly mocking bow, I say, I leave you to consider things as thoroughly as you see fit. You will not be leaving those bindings for hours at the least anyway. He says nothing as I walk away, but the air around him turns distinctly melancholic. Storn, I nod at the elder shaman before turning to his heir, Freya. Flame tongue. The old man, clad in artistically carved steel, inclines his head, a gesture slowly followed by his rattled daughter. You have my thanks for coming to my people's aid. I offer genuinely, even as my eyes turn slightly colder, but I know for a fact such risks are not taken for free. So what is it that the Skull desire for this service? Storn stills, looking almost confused. I ask for nothing. He responds after a short while, I did not charge into battle with reward on my mind, only the safety of those worthy of it. And he meant every single word of it. And yet, I press, one can believe in one thing while still desiring another. And yet, he frowns and pauses, the Skull. We are a simple people. Too simple for what I have planned. I quirk an eyebrow. Yes. He nods. I will not be foolish and demand that you leave our island as you found it, but I ask that the Skull be left to their peace. If he weren't asking me to let his people remain tree-huggers, I'd almost respect his mindset. Still, I remained a magnanimous master, and so I gave my answer. I will not promise that change will never come, but I will not force your people into it either. I've already seen how irritated their youths tended to be with their insularism. All it would take is 2 or 3 generations for them to abandon their ways after they saw the merits of mine anyway. The shaman sighs. I guess that is the best I am getting, isn't it? It is, I say, in a what can you do? Manner you are old enough to understand things will not always go as you want them to. Indeed, he agrees bitterly. Happy we could come to an understanding, I give him a wooden smile. Now could you direct me to the beast stone? I've been trying to scry the place, but it remains hidden, and I'd like for Miraak's influence to be gone sooner rather than later. He nods. Aye, I trust you have a map. Moments later he points the place out, and I flip it forward to Minthara through the might of the orb. Might as well give her something to do while I deal with this mess. The moment I finish the message, Freya finally deigns to speak up, likely to preempt any further argument between myself and her father. Shouldn't we be aiding the wounded? No need to rush, I wave dismissively. The ones in the ice are frozen magically, so their wounds will not deteriorate, and the rest are already dead. Except for Skirnir, who had Marco hovering over him with a healing spell in both hands. Without a word, I round onto the Stormcloak's position, just in time to hear Marco muttering, fuck, 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 fuck. Scorch materializes atop my shoulder and surge within my hand as the spell begins forming before me, its parameters optimized and its abilities to reintegrate a soul within a body far less rough than during my first attempt. The entire shoreline is blinded by gold. General POV. Skirnir Stormcloak felt rather lost as he stared into the colorful heavens of Sovngarde, his heart still beating with the excitement of battle, even as the realization that he had fallen had yet to settle within him. It was all too soon, he stubbornly repeated in his mind. Before he could spiral further, a familiar voice broke him out of it. Boy. He blinked rapidly before his eyes settled on a man seated upon a rock, armor pristine and axe leaning next to him. Father, Skirnir whispered. Skirnir. Ulfric Stormcloak spoke, you are here sooner than I expected. The younger man flinches minutely. Aye. Come, Ulfric pats the rock next to him. Sit with me. Ever so hesitantly, he does as he is told, his eyes constantly switching between his feet and his father. As he finally sat, he tries to speak. I dash. Save it. Ulfric raises his hand. If you want to apologize, then do not. But, boy, I said save it. Ulfric repeats more forcefully and looks away. All that you have done, all your decisions. Skirnir felt an immense weight in his gut in anticipation. You were right, Ulfric finishes to his son's great astonishment. He gapes for a good 10 seconds before settling into a dumb, "What?" You made the right choice, boy. Ulfric still refuses to look at him, and all your deeds after that. But I betrayed you. Skirnir stands, throwing his hands up. Your dream, your goals, I destroyed all of it. Ha! Ulfric barks a laugh and finally turns to face him. You give yourself too much credit, boy. Realizing what he meant, Skirnir, his embarrassment creeping up. Right. He coughed into his hand. Huffing in amusement, his father eyes the spot next to him and waits until Skirnir sits again. They are silent for a while, the elder enjoying the silence while the younger took only a few minutes to break. What did you mean by it? Ulfric hums. That my choices were right? Skirnir elaborates. Did you change your mind after battling Alduin? Ulfric takes his time answering, No, I did not. Seeing his son's growing confusion, he went on, Had I been placed back in time with all the information I had then, I would still have made the same choices. That the gods saw to turn my life into a fool's play is something only hindsight could show me. Skirnir cannot help but huff, still as stubborn as ever. On sheer reflex, his father directs him with a side-eyed glower, one that would have usually made him wince if he were not a disembodied soul at the moment. But instead of scolding him, Ulfric instructs, Tell me of your deeds. I have been watching, but I could not see all. And so Skirnir did, taking his time to explain all that he had done in exhaustive detail, anything from tavern brawls to heated skirmishes and monster hunts. By the time he was done, his father had adopted a distant look, and without prompting began telling him of his own experiences, utterly surprising him as he, for the first time ever, spoke of his imprisonment during the Great War and the voice that followed him ever after. Now far more understanding of why Ulfric had deigned to call his life a play, Skirnir was lost for words. All he could do was stare at the older man with pity and terror, unable to fully accept what had been done to him. Before they could truly resolve all that was said, however, the spot from which Skirnir first emerged began twisting and turning until a large golden passage was opened, one that immediately began tugging at the young man. You have a choice before you. Ulfric spoke with a voice that was both his own and not, you could step through that gate and face the world once more, or you could remain here with me. For a long while, Skirnir was stuck in place, unable to say anything or really do anything but think and consider. And yet in the end, both father and son knew there would only ever be one choice that he could make. He stepped towards the portal, pausing as he heard his father speak up. You have earned your place in Sovngarde now. You will need to do it once more should you wish to return. Skirnir didn't turn around. I have been called, he said half to himself and half to his father, and I must answer, always. He went to step through, but his father once more made him pause. I will wait for you then. Know that I am proud of you. Son. Skirnir Stormcloak did not hesitate again and was swiftly enveloped in a sea of golden flame. Time did not seem to pass in that place, feeling like an eternity and a moment both, and in a blink he was out. Once more feeling breath in his lungs, Skirnir blinked his eyes open just in time to see a familiar Dunmer tiredly leaning on his staff. You certainly took your bloody time, you fat ass. The elf glared at him. Fuck off. Skirnir fired back instantly. A loud snort was his answer. Raven's point of view. Hours later, the site of the battle was cleaned up, and a large camp was raised in its place, Skirnir already up and about, commanding the people alongside the captain of the moored Jagged Crown, the latter looking quite dour as he went about his work. Cleaning the blood off the imposing ship's deck would take days. The vessel may have taken an unrelenting force from a dragon to the face and remained mostly intact, but the crew atop it certainly wasn't nearly as resilient. I had to convince the man not to butcher the dragon before Minthara came to make the decision, needing to pull out the whole he was mind-controlled bit to make it actually stick, even if the sailors grumbled mightily. Thankfully for my sanity, Marco and the two Skarl fully believed I just healed Skirnir with some master-level restoration instead of actually reviving him, and the Stormcloak himself didn't look all that eager to talk about it on his own. Still, I'd have to take him aside sometime soon and explain to him the gravity of the situation while ensuring he reported any unforeseen issues that might crop up. Saddled with waiting as I was, I opened up my orb and began reading through the Bookseeker's progress report I got a few minutes back. Paper Pusher, we have it. Big D, anything too annoying? Paper Pusher, 2 barrows and a buried tomb. Baldy Grouch, yes, the same buried tomb you just so happened to send Carvani to excavate, almost as if you already knew where the books would be. Also, which infantile fool changed my signature? Skeletor Jr., just accept it. The sooner you do, the less hair you will lose. Oh wait. Paper Pusher, ha. Baldy Grouch, children. I am surrounded by children. Big D, no need to remind us you've been surpassed by practical infants, Neloth. We are aware. Baldy Grouch, do you want the fucking locations or not, Dagoth? Big D, you need to relax a bit, old man, but sure, if you insist, I would appreciate your tribute. Baldy Grouch, fucking. No, I will not play the jester for you any longer. The locations are Colbjorn Barrow, next to Raven Rock, White Ridge Barrow, and Benkongarika to the north. He sends the coordinates for the latter two and promptly disconnects. Big D, what a charming fellow. Paper Pusher, he already loves us, I can see it. Skeletor Jr., how I couldn't see the two of you were related for months is a mystery. The conversation trails off there, leaving me to consider my next moves as the survivors of the battle began celebrating their lives and those of the dead. Even the Thurskers were invited to join, having actually shown some bravery during the fight. Having heard their story, I couldn't help but pity them. Their fellow Nords must have looked at them as if they were worth less than the dirt they stood on, but thankfully they didn't have the time to get themselves lynched for their failings. Not that the Nords would actually kill them, but the social pressure would have inevitably caused some stupidity to happen. Shaking my head, I focused on the map held within my orb, and promptly decided to leave the 2 northern tombs for others to deal with while I descended into Colbjorn. After all, getting the chance to yoink some of the knowledge of Azidal, a contemporary of Isgramor whose enchantments allowed the Nords to genocide the shit out of the Falmer in the first place, was not something I'd like to miss. Shame he went mad in the end and decided to serve the dragons, and then Miraak like a complete idiot. But I guess that was what happened after elves murdered your family and you weren't as mentally firm as Isgramor. That I actually began respecting the ancient fart after Sovngarde still baffled my brain. All that would be left after that would be getting a hold of Varlock and slapping Kstag back into a more malleable state. Truly, my ability to plan the demise of legends was immense. Snorting at my own arrogance, I teleported atop a nearby cliff, summoned a comfy chair, and opened the accursed book on high-tier space void bullshittery that I wasn't even halfway through translating. This was going to be a very long evening.